big one. Here we are, all of us. I think we can take a seat. So thank you very much for gathering here. I have an incredible panel on my side. I will start making some introductions. I will present each one of you, and then we will start this very interesting discussion on the future of energy. So on my left, Dr. Kimberly Badil, director of the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. She is overseeing more than 8,700 staff and an annual budget of $3 billion US. She sets the lab strategic vision and direction, and while advising senior leaders across government, academia, and industry, she is holding a PhD in engineering and applied science from UC Davis. On her left-hand side, Stefano Buono, founder and CEO of Nucleo. Stefano is a physicist, an entrepreneur, and the founder of the company, which is developing a next-generation lead-cooled modular reactor fueled with reprocessed nuclear waste. A former CERN alumnus, he previously built advanced accelerator applications into a global radiopharmaceutical company acquired by Novartis for $3.9 billion US. Today he leads multiple innovation-focused ventures and chairs several technology and sustainability initiatives. Next is Warwick Matthews, the CEO of Tokamak Energy. Warwick is leading the mission of the company to commercialize fusion energy and high-temperature superconducting magnet technology. He brings over 2 decades of industrial leadership from Rolls-Royce, where he led senior global roles, most recently as Chief Procurement Officer for Civil Aerospace. He now oversees a world-class team advancing fusion for deployment in 2030. And finally, Moritz von der Linden, the CEO of Marvel Fusion. Moritz is the co-founder of the company, where he's driving a next-generation approach to laser-driven fusion energy with 25 years of experience founding and scaling up high-tech companies. And he has built a strong industrial and research partnership to advance Marvel's power plant concept and steer its long-term technology strategy. I am Stefano Marguccio. I am the Deputy CEO of Sustainable Energy for All, a United Nations initiative to support energy transition and give access to the 660 million people that today doesn't have access to energy. So I'm way out of my comfort zone today to moderate your panel, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Let's start with the first round of questions that are more up to the main topic of the Future of Investment initiative today. We are looking at the future of the power sector and the developments. So I will start with a question for Stefano. The quest for energy security is somehow pushing for a strong diversification of the energy ecosystem. So, in your opinion, what is the single greatest geopolitical risk of a multi-speed energy transition where some nations build domestic fortresses around the atom, while others pursue globally sourced supply chain for the sun?
Well, the question may seem complicated, but it's not really complicated because the answer is quite simple, I would say. Every country has to find its own balanced portfolio of energy. I cannot imagine Finland building solar power plants all around, or maybe deploying wind is a little bit more complicated because the wind is not strong there. So that's why they focus a lot on nuclear energy. So we have to, like building a balanced portfolio for finance, you have to build, as a country, a balanced portfolio of resources. Now, the question of security, of course, comes into the consideration because even if we are a stronger user of renewables, so you don't need any material from outside of your country, apart the one to build the facilities, then of course your degree of independency is higher. When it comes to programmable energy, that's quite different because then the nuclear choice is pretty important to make. And because when you start a nuclear reactor, you have years of a fuel on site already, maybe 20 years. So you can be really independent from the logic of geopolitical tension that may affect the price, the cost of your electricity, etc. So that's the answer.
Thank you very much. And I think you were mentioning the diversification of the systems and somehow the need for every country to have its own menu for production. And I see that the next level of challenge is system integration, right? You have different sources which are needing different infrastructures somehow. If we look at the renewables, for example, now they generate around 30% of electricity. They are the fastest scaling up source for sure. Last year, I think the number was 550 gigawatt deployed in 1 year, which is more than all the energy coming from or deployed into nuclear ever. But of course, the intermittency there requires multi-trillion-dollar investment in infrastructure and battery storage. The question for Kimberly then is, what is for you the primary point of failure for a global energy system that is simultaneously trying to manage the immediate volatility of the renewables while placing long-term, let's put it, high risk on a holy grail technology like commercial fusion? Yeah.
So I think it's a great question, and I think there are really two critical things to consider in the answer. One is the infrastructure. You mentioned that. If we're going to manage this very diverse energy portfolio, we're going to need a very different distribution system and management system. We've heard a lot here about artificial intelligence and what that will enable in terms of managing demand and supply for energy. And I think leaning into those new technology stacks is going to be very important for managing the energy system. So I think that's one potential failure mode. We don't move fast enough to deploy new infrastructure and new modes of operating that infrastructure to really take advantage. I think the second one is not really taking advantage of this diverse opportunity where we have today energy, fission, advanced reactors or small modular reactors ready to be deployed, well-tested, well-understood technology, renewables, costs come down, scaling very well around the world, other sources, and emerging technologies like fusion, where with the right investment and the right effort, we can bring an entirely new baseload generating power source that's clean and stable and can really be an important piece of this international mix in the future. So you can't just take the today energy and not think about the future. So the second failure mode is to not balance those two competing interests and ensure that we're making enough investment in ensuring that this opportunity that fusion presents is really realized in the next decades.
Yeah, and of course R&D play a huge part. Yes, please, Boris.
One important clarification, electricity is only 20% of primary energy demand. I think that's always important to mention when we talk about what percentage renewables have on electricity.
True. I think oil and gas is still feeding 86% of the whole system, so yeah. This for sure. So moving on to you, Moritz. We've been talking about system integration and somehow the need to balance the future and the past. Let's put it like this. So the defining question is where the most critical enabling investment must be made in this ecosystem. So is it in the physical infrastructure of massive long-duration energy storage or in the digital infrastructure of a high-powered predictive grid that we can orchestrate this blend of sources? What is your take?
Well, investment needs to be made in all of these areas, but one thing that a smart grid cannot overcome is the sheer increase in energy demand that we will see over the next 25 years. It will more than triple, and driven by economic growth in countries like India, demographics. Nigeria will have more people than the United States in 2050. And that is something where, investments in hardware and power plants are needed. And I believe that, the United States, for example, currently demonstrates that they're betting on all horses instead of a single one in this race to provide competitive baseload energy to power compute and AI as much as conventional industries such as aluminum and copper smelting. As Kim said, there is a promise of fusion energy, and backed by the fantastic result that the National Ignition Facility has shown. The laser-driven approach seems to be on the trajectory to make that happen, hopefully with some magnets from Warwick being part of it. To add to the current mix, the problem is that renewables in best case scenarios in 2050 will cover around 30 to 40% of global energy demand. Storage solutions, industrial scale for a chemical cracker will not exist in the next 100 years. Investment in competitive baseload energy is what is needed.
Thank you, Warwick. And let's focus a little bit more on fusion. I've been learning a lot before this panel, that the cumulative funding for private fusion company now totals almost $10 billion US. These are dates updated to mid of 2025. And roughly 2.6 have been raised in the last 12 months alone, backing a technology still likely years to decade for a grid-scale deployment. This creates an unprecedented leadership challenge, how to sustain the conviction beyond market and political cycles. So, Warwick, a question for you. What is the most scarce and essential leadership attribute required to navigate a venture from scientific breakthrough to commercial viability?
And none of these are easy questions, right? So, and just to introduce a little bit you've heard about laser-driven inertial fusion. My company is on the magnetic confinement side of fusion, where you're creating a plasma, you're then fueling that plasma, and you're holding it in a very strong magnetic field. But I would also say I consider myself and my company one of the realists in fusion. We won't give you extreme marketing. We'll tell you as it is, and we do that from operating the highest performing private fusion device in the world that we run at our facility in the UK. So we really know what we're doing, but we also know that we're not going to be turning on reliable, low cost of ownership, high uptime fusion plants within the next few years, because there are still hard challenges that we need to overcome. And the industry and governments are setting about those challenges. So you can look at my company, which is 16 years old, as an example on the leadership question. You start with really creative founders who have a vision, and they take a big risk, and they get money in behind their vision, and they get it off the marks. And the founders of our company did that for many years, but then the company realized you need somebody who's more operational to come in. And so a more operational leader came in. And I joined in January of 2023 because I have a commercial background, and the company really needed to commercialize what it was doing. We can't have private science projects that investors are queuing up to fund. Investors are queuing up to fund an exciting return on investment through fusion, but also through the technologies that fusion is creating along the way, and that's what I'm here doing. But lastly, it's not all about me. I think any leader of any of these companies It's all about the team that you're creating that works for you. And for that team, I'm looking for the deep fusion knowledge, but I'm looking for the deep program execution knowledge. So not just the science project, but punching up through TRL levels on your technology, really having rigorous governance in how you drive it forward, and some really creative commercial people who can go out there and sell this fantastic technology around the world.
That's an incredible mix. And what I think is needed, somehow it was underlying this discussion, to develop this kind of technology, you need patient capital, right? You need someone that is ready to put the money on the table and give you the freedom to develop. Let's put it like this. So a question for Kimberly, probably the governance model of these kind of companies is key to sustain this multi-year span. In your view, is it the most effective structure built around a singular visionary scientist, founder idea who can command long-term conviction, which is probably what Stefano has been doing in the past and probably is doing yet? Or does it require a new type of public-private partnership designed to insulate strategic projects from market cycles and political cycles?
It's an excellent question. And I'll just note that the reason we're talking about fusion today is because of a very long history of very patient capital being invested by governments around the world. So fusion was the province of big publicly funded programs for decades. At my lab, 6 or 7 decades now, because it was a very hard problem. And so it was not going to turn into a commercially viable product on a cycle where private investment really made sense. So in the last few years, we've had a number of science and technology breakthroughs that have allowed it to move into this, very aggressive commercial push. But both programs share the same attributes. To do something that hard and that complex requires someone with incredible drive and vision. You don't start down this path unless you have that kind of fortitude. It's going to be a very difficult road. And we have had those people throughout the history of fusion research, both inertial and magnetic, who were just towering figures who saw not the barriers, but the opportunities and really pushed through.
You need profits.
You need profits.
Yeah.
But it's a system. It's an incredibly complex system. So as we move into this next phase, people who can translate these breakthroughs that we've had into operating, reliable, readily available 24/7, 365 systems is going to be a critically important feature, and that's a very important shift from where the publicly funded programs have been. The second shift has been pace. Investors want returns on their investments, so we're all learning to move at a speed that we had not achieved before, which is really very energizing for both public and private. And, I run a very large research institution. I have maybe 1,000 material scientists and engineers. So if one of these companies has a materials challenge and they come to me, that's huge leverage. This capability has been built over time, and now I can work with the private sector to help them make faster progress on these enormous challenges. They'll still build the power plant, but I think that public-private ecosystem is really going to be critical if we want to make this technology available on the timescales we believe are possible.
Yeah, the public sector is an enabler, somehow an accelerator of what the private can put in place. So now, being where we are, I think I need to give the chance to the companies to elevator pitch a little bit on what they are doing. I will start with Stefano. So I think time and money is critical for investors. So can you give us an idea of Nucleo's timeline for delivering energy to the grid? And for those less familiar with your technology, can you briefly explain how your lead-cooled AMR is working? To what extent they could repurpose today's stockpile of nuclear waste, which is, I think, it's breakthrough. It's a very revolutionary approach. So, over to you.
It's a revolutionary approach, but it's based on a lot of experience from the industry. Consider that the fission industry is operating on a commercial level since more than 60 years. But the research, the innovation has been blocked, I would say, for 40. since the first accidents and the Chernobyl accident, I would say that there is no more research. So what we have done essentially is to think about what is the perfect strategy for the industry, picking the technology from the past and make it an industrial venture. This has been the idea of using lead as a coolant for the reactors allows essentially to have three main advantages. The first one is the possibility of creating passive safety very easily. So no more accidents, any small incident of a facility can be solved in switching off in automatic switching off the reactor with no damage. This is the first objective. Second objective is to achieve that with a low cost. Because of course you can implement passive safety even in more complicated plants, but it's expensive. So we want to have a very competitive cost of electricity. And again, lead is helping us in doing that. But the third challenge is even more interesting because at the origin of the nuclear energy, the idea was to reuse continuously the fuel, the spent fuel, because there is still a lot of energy inside the spent fuel. 200 times more energy than what we have extracted. So if you reuse it, you have a very long life to the material that you have extracted. And this is what's possible, is possible with sodium reactors, with lead reactors, with a category of reactors that has not been developed by the industry. So we are part of this effort now. We are the only private company that is now has the design of a factory of a fuel that is done out of this recycled material. But this is, again, an experience of the past. The French have done this kind of fuel in the past, etc. It has served the sodium reactors in the past. So now we have to revive this technology in a new industrial venture. And
Which is the percentage of the fuel that you can reuse? How much of the waste
essentially,
you can reuse?
with our technology, all of it.
Okay.
It really changes the physics a little bit, and you can actually reuse many times.
So there will not be any waste at the end of the process?
There will be only the uranium atoms that are fissioned, so you have fission fragments. This is a very nice waste, because after 250 years, you have zero radioactivity inside, and you have a lot of nice materials, like rhodium, to dig into these materials. So it's very interesting.
So, and how many years to the grid? How many years to the grid for you?
By the end of the decades, I think ourselves and a few other actors may be on the grid already.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about tokamak, Warwick. We've been hearing it's a transformative moment for fusion. How do you see the ecosystem evolving? What are your priorities? And again, what timeline are you targeting for commercialization? And what are the biggest challenges that you see between now and market?
Thank you. So I might reverse the question a little bit. So the industry, if we had all of the 50 or so private fusion companies up on stage, will probably give you a date from the early 2030s to 2040, I would think. But again, back to the realist bit, we believe this is about the breakthrough experiments that prove gain, that prove control of a burning plasma, but then what the industry needs is a robust power station that is resilient and can last for decades with high uptime. So there's a big engineering challenge in there, which probably puts you to the right-hand side of that scale. And that's one reason why in fusion, our company, we've chosen to take all of the deep knowledge that we've got and really actively partner with governments and industry on a number of programs. Because I believe that you need government and industry coming together to get the job done. The UK is a very important program for us. They're funding a very large future tokamak, which we can bring a lot of value to. Japan is important to us. Yesterday, it was a pleasure to be in King Abdulaziz City of Science and Technology, where we're going to start working with CAXT on a collaboration on fusion development and other technologies. Now, from a business and commercial point of view, I need to have something more, and that is actively commercializing the superconducting magnet technology that we've developed for fusion. And to explain what a superconductor is, it is a probably 2% of a human hair thick, thin film deposition of a ceramic called REBCO, rare earth barium copper oxide. And we take that material and we wind it into very high performing magnet coils. That 2-micron thick layer, interestingly, will transfer about 5,000 amps of current through 2% of a human hair, which brings us on to another topic. Not only are we commercializing this technology into customers in science and medical applications, transportation applications, into all areas of research, but we're opening up a new market, which is just using the superconductor that we have made very robust to transfer energy. Seems obvious, but it isn't obvious. And when you look ahead at what data centers need, not just for the energy for the data center or the chips that your processor power is with, how do you move the energy around the data center itself? And when you have NVIDIA chips calling for 1 megawatt plus at the rack, copper or aluminium doesn't work. Superconductors will work. Microsoft 2 weeks ago put a call to action out to industry to develop superconducting technology for power distribution. And my company has got 10 years of experience, know-how, patents to do just that. So that's really where we're going to take our investment dollars now, is scaling up superconductors. We just bought a company in the UK that provides the machines that wind superconducting cables. So that's the exciting bit of our business. And with that, we have a highly profitable, around 300-400 million of revenue by 2030 opportunity for investors.
That's great to hear. So Moritz, over to you. We've been talking about innovation. I think really it will not be only about fusion, it will be also about developing all that is around fusion, vis-a-vis magnets, semiconductor, lasers. Somehow, how do you see the innovation spillover playing out, and then what are the priorities for Marvell Fusion for the future?
Yeah, so building on what Kim said, those 6 decades of hardcore research and technology development is essentially what we're standing on, and it has, granted an incredible scientific breakthrough that cannot be underlined big enough, but to now turn this into a commercially viable power plant is a long way to go with enormous challenges. And I would say number one, it requires public-private partnerships. Marvell Fusion has partnered with the Colorado State University to build the Atlas facility, which will be the cutting-edge short pulse laser facility on the planet when it will be commissioned in early 2027. Livermore has loosened their ways how they work with commercial companies, so they've gotten cool now and are actually under Kim's leadership becoming more flexible in working with commercial companies. And as Kim said, there is a number of areas where we can collaborate. I would say the second area that we need is an industrial supply chain. The lasers that we require, high energy short pulse lasers, such as the ones that we're building for Colorado, are rice corn chessboard in the first row, and for a power plant they need to be moved to row 7 or 8. So the industrial supply chain will be critical to scale to levels that will eventually bring on the hardware for such an undertaking.
Will you need also hydrogen production for the reactors? A step up of the hydrogen production.
Sorry, I can't.
Sorry.
It's hard to hear you.
Will you need also a high stake of hydrogen production for the reactors or not?
Well, so we're working with a fuel that is based on boron. We've pioneered a way to layer hydrogen isotopes into boron, which is a fuel that is a non-toxic, room temperature, solid state. And yes, of course, the fuel or the target development, which contains the fuel, is another area that needs an industrial push. We've made very good progress over the last 2 years, I would say, to move it into an area where we can at least theoretical conceive it could be mass produced. But that step still needs to be covered. To answer your question, the hydrogen part itself isn't really the big challenge. It's other areas that are challenging.
I can imagine. So, I thank you very much. I would like to give Kimberly the floor to close this discussion. She is the independent scientist behind all us. So, please.
So just in general, this is a really important moment. There's a confluence of things happening that present a really interesting opportunity. One is the supply and demand question, the rise of AI, so the need for energy, development around the world, driving a need for energy is really putting the spotlight on advancing new sources of energy rapidly in a way that we haven't seen for a long time. So I think this idea of fission today, other sources today, fusion tomorrow is a really great way to think about the world at large. The second thing is that on timescales, roughly speaking, time is money. So to the extent that we can concentrate capital around the most important challenges that each of these technologies faces, the faster we can get them to commercial scale and the faster we can get them deployed to the grid. So building partnerships, working together in new ways. Thank you, Martz, for acknowledging that public sector is really trying to be flexible in new ways so that we can ensure that all of this great private capital that's being invested can see returns in the near term. So with that, this 10 to 20 year horizon begins to look realistic. But we really need the public sector and the private sector going together down this journey. And I think it's going to be a very exciting couple of decades.
Thank you very much. We've been amazing with the time. And I thank my panelists. I learned a lot. I hope you did as well. And we will see how this will develop in the coming years. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Stefano.
Good afternoon. It's lovely to see you all here. Please take a seat. So this afternoon we're going to be talking about, can the commercial space race survive astropolitics? an expression I had not heard of before, astropolitics. I'm being educated. The space economy has quietly become one of the fastest growing sectors in the world, worth over 600 billion, with nearly 4/5 of it in private sector hands. But space isn't just another market. It sits at the intersection of national ambition, commercial innovation, and geopolitical competition, what some are calling the new astropolitics. As space becomes more commercially viable, can private enterprise remain independent, or will it inevitably be pulled back into the gravitational field, pun intended, of state power? How can governments harness and advance their space economy while keeping it out of the constraints of our current geopolitics and power politics? How can the commercial industry manage these tensions and continue to thrive? What does the future look like? We have three fantastic speakers with us today. David Avino, the CEO and founder of Argotech. Next to him, Emiliano, I'm not even going to try, apologies, Kargeman.
Very good.
The CEO and founder of Satellogic, and beside him, Vladimir Levikin, CEO and founder of Skyrora. Apologies for my pronunciation. David, I want to start with you. You've suggested that the future is a continued transition from government-led to commercially led. And of course, you own your own company. It's a private enterprise. What is needed for this transition, and what's going to get in the way?
Yeah, let me give you, you shared really good numbers. Let me share a little bit of a few more figures. The Space Foundation is talking about in 2032 about 1 trillion, and right after 3 years, 1 trillion 800 billions. So we're talking about huge, really important numbers for the future. There are two different investments. So we usually in the space business, we talk about infrastructures, so the space segment and the ground segment. So those infrastructure up there in space, they are really expensive. So our business is very expensive, I can say. We require investments. Just another number I wanna give it to you, since we are in an economic forum. It's about investments in 2024. They were 25% more the year before. So this is another important statement to know, an analysis to know. So stating this, a single company, a joint venture between different companies, a collaboration between different investors might not be useful, but might not be enough for building up new infrastructures. Even more because every time we are talking about space, space means dual applications, commercial, defense, and so most of the time the government has to support the investments. So the balance, I can say, there is no recipe for this, I can say. When I started in my company, I thought that would have been already in 2020, this transition, but this has been delayed a little bit. You know why? Even more now, because the geopolitical situation changed a lot in the past few years, and we know very well.
So we're going to come back to that, which is how do we manage a space economy in a really volatile geopolitical space? This is the new arena. But Emiliano, I want to bring you in, if I may. How do we stop just picking up on what David's saying? How do we actually prevent space being the next kind of global competition arena? Can we?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So maybe I'd take a step back first. I think there's this tension, how we think about astropolitics, there's this tension between kind of the real politics side, which is about control, which is about, occupation of space, and the kind of idealistic side, which is around thinking space as a commons and, and how we create the rules to operate in these commons. I think there's a pendulum here that's been back and forth. The undercurrent today is obviously the rules-based world that we have lived in for the last 50 years is moving into a more transactional, deal-making world these days, right? I think the same undercurrent exists in astropolitics, which is, in a sense, geopolitics with the addition of, space. Space is essentially this big ocean that every nation on Earth has a border with, right? So it kind of changes the topology of geopolitics from that perspective. But if you think about this pendulum, at the beginning of the space era, from Sputnik roughly to the end of Apollo, it was a real politics world, right? It was about getting first to the moon. It was about showing supremacy, right? Then I guess from the Moon Treaty and the ITU and the years that follow, let's say 1975 until the Ukraine war, I think we lived kind of the rules-based world of astropolitics, right? And I think commercial companies flourished in this era, right? Now the pendulum is swinging back towards real politics. I think the biggest, probably if I have to say one event that, that is kind of the example of this was when Elon decided to shut down Starlink service over Ukraine.
Yeah.
And basically every nation in the world said, well, first of all, it's clear that all space infrastructure is dual use. And second, we can't really rely on, infrastructure that we don't own. And that's kind of been pushing, the idea of sovereignty and local supply chains and friend sourcing. And, I think that's kind of where we are today.
So that's where I want to dig in. I want to bring Vladimir into the conversation, but I want to dig into what are the consequences of that if space becomes the next arena for geopolitical power politics? What does that mean for commercial enterprises? What does that mean for innovation, efficiency, all of those wonderful things? But Vladimir, let me come to you, because I think one of the dangers that we always have in conversations like this is we assume straight line trajectories. That's the way physiologically our brains work. We assume that what happened yesterday is going to happen tomorrow. And yet, in some of the frontiers of innovation, that is clearly not the case. Right? In the AI space, it is clearly not the case to say what happened yesterday, we're going to keep on the same kind of trajectory. I interviewed Elon Musk some years ago, and he was talking about logarithmic curves of progression, right, of innovation. So before we get into how do we manage the now, I want to make sure we're looking ahead. So what is the next big disruption from your perspective in the space industry? What's going to take us out of the straight line progression?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So first of all, there are a number of areas, right? And obviously, the topic of this conference is AI, right? AI will have a serious impact on space, especially Earth observation services, right? But I will let the other people to speak about it. Let's say, I would like to focus on the elephant in the room, which is, I believe, the next big step forward, is there so-called direct-to-device services, which start to emerge, which is basically mean when the satellites will be able to send the internet, whatever connectivity, to your mobile phone directly, which then will allow our industry, which is the new space, operate on completely new area, which is telco market, which is multi-trillion market, much bigger than us, right? And the Elon Musk, which you mentioned, is declared this, right? We're on this race right now, and obviously SpaceX is the most equipped because the Starship program, which is capable to bring crazy amount of payload on orbit, is exactly was done for this purpose. And what makes this disruptive, especially for the telcos, when the telcos need to upgrade their mobile network, for example, from 5G to 6G, they require years to upgrade every single modem station, ground station, and so on, while this new space will be able to upgrade the whole network and move from, let's say, 6G to 7G just with a few Starship launchers. So that, I believe, the biggest disruptive innovation which we are...
So just to be clear, you're talking about the kind of speed of innovation being faster because you don't have to replace all of this kind of solid infrastructure. But presumably, so is it a software change that you're talking about? Because if these satellites are up in space, then...
Yeah, you're also right that some of those could be changes of the software, but what I'm talking about, when the new space will step into the telecom business, right?
Okay.
Then the same transition, right, to upgrade the whole network
Yeah.
network globally. Imagine like moving from 4G to 5G took about 5 years, right? For every single, millions and millions workstation and millions of people be involved in this network upgrade around the globe. While the new space, I'm talking about Starlink, for example, right, or new generation direct-to-device services, will be able to upgrade the whole network by just upgrading the constellation of the satellites,
Okay.
which is relatively very much simple, especially if you have such large vehicles like Starship.
So if we think about the impact of mobile telephony in the global south as kind of leapfrogging the hard infrastructure that we did, you're talking about that on steroids, right? You're talking about the kind of the speed of change, the transformation, the disruption. Phenomenal. Go ahead.
I want to come back to your statement. Actually, it was right
Okay.
about the software. You know why? Because in the past years, we were building new satellites every time we had to have new telecommunication or new activities. Now the satellites are becoming more software-based. You know why? First of all, because before we had to wait a lot of time before qualifying the components that we have in our satellites. Now the qualification is going to be more straight. And so this means that every time we have a new software to be uploaded on our satellites, maybe they are capable of managing those software. They have more computational capabilities. And at the same time, if we don't have computational capabilities, we're going to replace those satellites because the launch costs decreased a lot thanks to Elon Musk and other providers. So the software is going to be the key. Is already the key here on Earth. It's going to be even more the key for satellites.
I think I wanted to maybe building on some of what my companion said. I maybe want to bring us back to the astropolitics conversation.
Please.
I think, there's if you look at the kind of the distance between Sputnik and Starlink, right? It's kind of the distance between the telegraph and the internet in a sense, right? Like the advance is huge. And what you're talking about here, at the next stage is basically the way that commercial industry has driven innovation in space. It's shown by that, particularly if you compare it to the distance between the Apollo program and the Artemis program, right? Which are, you would say, the distance between a horse carriage and a larger horse carriage, right? Like there's really not a big change there. But what's very interesting, and so the underlying question, I guess, is if the pendulum is swinging back towards real politics and astropolitics, towards states being the driver for innovation, toward closed down innovation instead of open innovation.
Exactly, yeah.
What does that mean for, for the growth of space technology? What does that mean for the commons? I think there's positive and negative aspects. I will, probably just open the conversation here to you guys. But one of the positive aspects of this is government and defense are a great anchor tenant, and they're willing to fund, research, and they're willing to fund technology that is very hard to fund otherwise, right? And this is obviously great. We wouldn't have been able to build Starlink if we didn't have 40 years of
Government.
Defense investment in space technology before, right? Now, obviously, it seems like the innovation transition to the commercial space and flourished extremely fast from 2010 to 2025, right? But of course, it's built on top, of gigantic investments done behind closed doors, let's say, for tens of years. So I think there's probably something like this is probably about to happen in the current scenario, where there's going to be tons of innovation funded by government and defense behind, small groups or clubs. But for this innovation to reach the global and for this to be available to all, I think maybe another pendulum swing.
So you're essentially saying original, 60, 70 years ago, it was funded mostly by governments. They were the kind of driving force. The commercial sector then has taken over and done a fantastic job, and now we're moving back to an area of principally government funded. Is that what it's going to look like? Is it government funded, or is it public-private in the sense that, you talk about, in the territorial defense space, we look at what's happening in Ukraine and we say, there's an enormous amount of innovation, and that's happening driven by the need on the ground, but it's also being driven by commercial entities, right? So how's that balance? Maybe, to David and Vladimir, how do you see it changing?
So I'm not expecting too much changes in terms of the government support, right? So
okay.
I think that the main countries already made their bet, right? Don't forget that SpaceX received from the US government in different estimation from 10 to 38 billion, let's say, support in terms of the contracts and other forms, right? So we are the British company, so we kind of get not to rely on the government, because that help would arrive simply because UK cannot afford this, same amount of support which the US can.
Yeah.
So that's why I wish that it was government support, but realistically we should rely only on ourselves and try to do this, the roadmaps, potentially side of products to basically start to generate revenue, build a sustainable business, right, which then will help to fund the in our case, rocket
So for
program.
you, it's very much commercially driven. David?
Yeah, no.
I know you work in the...
Of course, we work in different environments also with the Italian government and different governments. We're busy in US as well. So I think it's important to know the partnership with the public and private partnership is going to be still very important. Maybe it's going to change a little bit the model. So it's almost the same happened already in US. So the government they're gonna pay not the entire infrastructure, but maybe they're gonna pay upfront the service. Mm-hmm. And so the private they're gonna build the infrastructure, having already on one hand the contracts signed for the services to be provided as soon as the infrastructure will be operational. So this is a model that I think is gonna work. It's completely different if we're talking about defense. Defense is completely different because of course the defense applications, they wanted to own the infrastructure most of the time. They wanted to own the data. They wanted to own their control service.
Yeah.
They need to be very tied into.
And how is... So, let's talk a little bit for a moment about what's happening here on Earth and the kind of fracturing of politics. And how is that? How is the... What's the impact of that having on your supply chains? What's the impact of that on your ability to do business? Because back in the world when everybody was, I'm exaggerating, but people were collaborative, right? And you could cross borders without problems. That is no longer the case, or not becoming so. So how's what's happening here on Earth affecting your ability to...
Yeah, there's obviously been a big change, at least on a narrative from commercial companies building global infrastructure to commercial companies helping build sovereign capabilities, right?
Yeah.
I think that's, the first order effect. So you go, Europe is thinking about how they build their own Starlink, right? How they build their own Starship, right? Like, this is clearly not something that was on the minds of anybody 6 years ago, right, or 8 years ago. And I think this is the first order effect, is you're going to go towards, friend sourcing or small clubs where, there's going to be a lot of effort in duplicating supply chains locally, right?
So it's going to be inefficient.
A lot of investment. So that's very inefficient,
yeah,
right, for a lot of reasons. It's obviously efficient from the point of view of sovereign capabilities and from the point of view of resilience against, the type of world that we're walking into, but it's clearly more inefficient from the point of view of how we invest dollars and how we transform that into infrastructure for the benefit of all. So I think that's kind of the counterpart to, the good side, which is, okay, investment in defense, it's a big driver for innovation, but obviously part of that investment is going to go into replicating things locally that,
So there's more money,
in.
but that money is being used less efficiently, and it's more costly because you're having to buy local rather than that.
And there, yeah, correct. And there are limitations to scale, right? Like, whereas once
Yeah.
you could say, oh, we're going to build this and everybody in the world is going to use it, now you basically have to say, okay, where are we going to build this?
Yeah.
And based on where we're going to build this, we kind of try to figure out who's going to be able to use it, right? Which, obviously for, kind of, we used to think about many space technologies and a lot of space infrastructure as winner takes all place, right? Where you would build something like Starlink and you would say, well, once you build that, nobody else has really an incentive to go and do the same thing, right?
It's like GPS and Galileo, right?
Right. That's no longer the case, right? And I think that's, interesting, at least.
Go on.
And even more for all these changes from geopolitical standpoint, I think is forcing governments to avoid that there is just one provider for that kind of service, because otherwise, he was mentioning Starlink for Ukraine.
Yeah.
You know what happened?
You're held hostage.
That's right. And
Yeah.
you don't want to be hostage anymore from just one provider.
Or one individual.
Yeah, I would say that talking from the rocket's perspective, right? So there is no change. So it was, regardless of the globalization era which we used to live, right? It was never the case for the rocket. It was always regulated, export controlled, and to do use and such. So that's why, we get used to such kind of restrictions. We respect them. We understand their purpose. We understand that we are the subject of national interest. It's great that there are written rules. So that is where you can play and you can work around this, not work around, but according to the rules, right? That is great. So from one perspective, we quite admire this situation, because we never experienced anything different.
So you're used to it. You've built a business around the fact that you've got the rules in place.
Yeah, that's just given, yeah.
Which leads nicely on to a slightly different question, which is who's going to write the rules of space, right? So if we're operating in the military sense here in territorially or in the maritime space, you've got EEZs, right, around the borders of countries that you have responsibility of your area of seas around your countries, and then you've got international rules for the other parts of the seas. Does that exist in space? And if it doesn't exist in space, who's going to write those rules? We're looking at a ineffective UN. Is there any chance that we're going to have a common assessment?
There are, again, historically we had some base rules. I think the Moon Treaty of 1967 is probably the biggest example. But that is changing, right? A few years ago, I think Luxembourg was the first country to issue some laws suggesting that private individuals and private companies could own things in space. The US followed very quickly with similar set of rules. So there is, in a sense, a transition towards a more mercantilistic view of space. And I think that's going to have to play out before the pendulum swings back towards rules-based. I find interesting the question of what would make the pendulum swing back, right?
Okay.
What needs to happen for the world to decide suddenly that we need a set of rules to work in space? And I think we're not there yet.
Italy also approved a few months ago the space law, so it's a good starting point, I can say. The European government is working on the Space Act as well. But the main issue that there is no law that is, in a certain way, implying all the actors, all the countries to work on.
Yeah.
What I mean, that I don't think there are some nations that will never apply those rules that the Europeans or the EU is going to sign, or Italy, or maybe Luxembourg or other countries. This is going to create a lot of issues, I can say. Just an example for the space debris. If the European Parliament, through the Space Act, they're going to impose a lot of rules to the European industries, this is going to be an issue from a competition point of view towards other countries that are not respecting those rules.
So you're essentially saying what's happening territorially is now happening up there.
Yeah, I would like to just add a bit, right? So there are the rules on the ground, which is basically regulate the launch itself, right? Which we completely respect, and the government should define the red lines about the safety, national security interests, right, and spectrum allocations, right? And then the industry should develop the standards, which it does right now, standards how to achieve and how to scale within these rules, which is common sense ones, to achieve the launch itself. As for the, it's getting quite interesting, even when every single launch, imagine that the rocket flies over the foreign territories.
Yeah.
Even the launch. We are not at space yet, but we are already the subject of a number of different jurisdictions, which is the process when we are getting licenses. The government, British government, help us a lot to get this sorted with a number of different nations. Then we're on orbit, and then we also may collide other satellites. Everything must be balanced. The spectrum, the frequencies which satellites operate on can block each other and so on. So there is right now a good, healthy international agreements and law as it is right now. And so far it was all right and decent and reasonable when all the parts, including the big players, were respecting these international laws. It may change.
It
right?
may change.
So
I'm going to come back. I want to come to the audience. There's a poll that we're going to put up. Please take a look at take your cameras out. The question that we're asking you is, who will ultimately dominate the space economy? Is it governments or is it corporates? So where are we on that volatile spectrum that you discussed? As people are answering that, I have a question because we've got quite a number of Europeans here. Just to close, does Europe have a chance of competing against China, against the United States from a commercial perspective? Do we have the resources? How's that going to play out? Because again, if I'm taking geopolitics and putting it in space.
You know, from a technical standpoint, yes. Of course, we do have technologies. We do have different companies, large companies, small companies. We can go through all the activities required in space. From an economic standpoint, I think Europe has to invest more.
Yeah.
Because we are just fundraising right now as a company. And compared, of course, to the capital market in US is completely different. Mm-hmm. And since our business is capital intensive, we require more investments from EU.
Okay, so we need to do more.
I think the definition of foolishness is doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? And if you look at Europe, I think continues to focus on regulation. The fusion between Leonardo and Thales and Airbus, I think is a clear example that Europe has not learned its lessons and has its act together. And so the future is not written, but if you have to guess from where we are today, I would say no chance.
So not enough money, too regulatory. Vladimir, you're based in the UK.
Yes, but let's assume that I'm based in Europe, right? So
okay.
Because actually in aerospace, we have European Space Program agency, which is UK is still the part of, right? So I believe that jointly combined for sure, right? Europe can compete and will compete and competing with space. If not Europe, then who? We have skills, we have experience, we have legacy, right? We have finance jointly combined. So that's what we do.
So we can. So we haven't talked about talent. We haven't had enough time to talk about talent, but the takeaway from this conversation for me is we do have potential massive disruptions coming, but we should also anticipate that whatever's happening on the ground territorially is also playing out in space. And maybe there's a bit of a lag time, but it's not long. So one word each, literally one word each. If you could snap your fingers and make one change, what would it be?
Bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy.
I think there's an alignment around the idea that the Earth has finite resources and there's infinite resources for us. out there.
Think
I would
infinite. We need to
focus
look
on
elsewhere.
that.
Industry-wise, breakthrough in return of investments as an industry.
Okay. Breaks the rules, joint investments.
Breakthrough and get the high return of investments which already been spent as an industry at all.
Okay.
Overall.
Collaboration, I'm taking that one. So we have our governments and corporations. The good news is corporations for the people on the panel. Thank you so much for joining me. Will you join me in thanking our panelists, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch and isn't too sleepy. We have a very, very exciting panel coming up where we're trying to answer the question, is innovation enough to secure energy security? My name is Amena Bakr, and I'm the head of research at Kepler, based out of Dubai. And the thing is, with energy security, it's a bit like health. When you don't have it or it's compromised, then you start thinking about, how do I get it back? But it's something that we need to think about in advance, given the leeway that we need to complete many of these energy projects. So to talk about this and more, I have an excellent panel here with me today. Sitting next to me is Han Young, Managing Director of Gaocell. Next to him is Douglas Kimmerlin, Executive Chairman and founder of Energy Capital Partners. Then we have the Honorable Douglas Smith, Global Head of Public Affairs, Managing Director of MENA at the nuclear company. Fred Thiel, Chairman and CEO of MARA, welcome. And Fadi Saida, the Acting CEO of the Voluntary Carbon Market. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Han Young, I want to start off with you. Do you think it's a kind of one-size-fit-all solution to the energy security problem?
Well, look, if we do this wrong, the clean energy transition just becomes a new kind of resource war, right? We spent the last century chasing after oil and gas. Now we are at risk of spending the next century chasing after lithium, cobalt, platinum, are these rare earth materials. The narrative is already shifting from how do we decarbonize into who controls the supply chain.
Yeah.
Right?
So, who is controlling the supply chain?
Well, that's what we are trying to find that out, right?
Okay.
Well, no. See, every region has different physical realities. Desert climates in Saudi, Arctic climates,
right.
Dense megacities in Korea, where I'm from, conflict zones, weak transmission line. These are all different problems, right?
Yeah.
So if we say true energy independence is doing 100% of your own everything, that is not the goal. The goal is to establish a world where capabilities are shared by design. Okay?
Yeah.
We need to look at it in a way where we need to establish an intelligent interdependence between the countries, shared industrial corridors between trusted parties. Right? So here's what we're doing with our company is we produce the largest, most powerful methanol-based hydrogen fuel cell in the world. And we are going to be producing that right here in the kingdom. Why? Because the kingdom offers, there's no other country in the world that can produce green hydrogen and green methanol at scale such as this country.
Right.
So what we are doing is weaving intentionally our capabilities together to create a world where multiple solutions coexist.
Are you involved in the NEOM project?
Well, we hope to be one day.
Okay.
So that's what we are doing, right? Multiple solutions coexist because this clean energy transition is not a resource war. It's
Right.
about stability.
Doug, I want to come to you and ask, how do you balance your investments between, traditional upstream, oil, gas, all of that, and then looking at renewables? How do you balance between them?
Well, we're focused on power generation.
Okay.
And it is kind of all of the above. And as we're talking about here today, obviously we look at the marketplace and what does the market need. We've got a crisis in terms of supply-demand mismatch. And we can argue if it's more of a demand issue or more of a supply issue. But we've got, in the U.S. where I focus, we're still almost 40% coal and nuclear, and they're old. Very
Right.
old. A lot of it built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We're going to lose some of that capacity. So we've got to replace that at the top of the list. And then demand, it's not just AI. Right? We've got LNG, liquefaction. That is hugely electricity intensive. All of the onshoring of manufacturing in the U.S., the world of crypto, electricity intensive, electric vehicles. So when we look at all of that and the balancing, where's it going to come from? I start with let's try to slow the shutdown of these old facilities. Number one. Number two, these hyperscalers, they want the power now and they want it in scale. So what can we do in terms of brownfield expansion
Right.
that we can do in the next 2 years, not the next 10 years?
Right.
Solar and storage on a relative basis, it's cheaper than natural gas, and we can get it online within 12 months.
Integrating it into the grid right away.
Bring it into
Yeah.
the grid, and by the way, yes, the subsidies are going away. Yes, there's tariffs.
Sure.
But relative to a natural gas-fired power plant where the price of gas turbines have doubled in the last several years, perhaps not. Number 4, the big one is natural gas, and that I think is going to be the dominant because that can come quickly and it can come the cheapest. And then nuclear, which Doug's going to talk better than I will about it.
Sure.
We want it. We're rooting for
Big
it.
advocate of nuclear here, yeah.
Yeah, but what's
Yeah.
the cost and what's the timeline?
Sure.
So it's balancing and looking for opportunities.
I'm going to steal
there.
your question here.
Go
Doug,
ahead.
what's the cost and what's the timeline?
Great question, and I like the fact that you said we should look at everything because we believe in that too. I mean, we're
Right.
super excited to bring the first new nuclear construction projects online in the United States in 25 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the gap of what we need and what we have is huge and only growing bigger. Timeline, we think from first shovel in the ground, our first plant, 2.4 gigawatt plant, will be roughly 6 years.
Okay.
We're building these at fleet scale, so
Right.
same model, same
So these are not
size.
small nuclear plants. No, we're talking about a
2.4 gigawatt.
right.
So that could power the city of Cincinnati, 1.8 million homes or so.
Wow.
So, but most importantly, kind of pivoting off, the downsides on solar and battery storage is consistent baseload power. And that's what so many people need it, whether it's, if we want to build out further high tech and medical, data centers, et cetera, what they most need is consistent baseload power. And that's what we think we can bring. Through our partnership with Palantir and our proprietary operating system we're building, to your cost question, we believe we've figured out the cost problem. Historically in the United States, there's no denying it, gigantic cost overruns. The French got very clever in how they designed them, and that's what I kind of like to say. We're looking at sort of the Model T Ford approach here. We're not giving anybody a choice. You're getting a state-of-the-art plant, but we're picking the color, we're picking the power plant, we're picking everything, and it will allow us, as a result, to push our ordering pipeline so much further out. So we'll be ordering in scale. And I think that will help dramatically to not only lower costs, but consistency of delivery on time and below budget.
Sorry, just to follow up there. And the risks of nuclear?
I think the risks are gigantic if we don't do it. We desperately need it, whether it's the United States, Eastern Europe, here in the Gulf in particular. We are at staggering risk to not do it. I mean, the only thing that's had fewer, lower risk is wind. In terms of safety.
Right.
Nuclear power is incredibly, particularly the modernization, and we'll be building what they call sort of version 3s. The safety systems built into it will be state of the art. The key factors are zero emissions. So not only will they be incredibly safe as physical structures, but for the environment, they'll be incredibly safe.
Sure. Fred, I want to bring you here into the conversation. I mean, Mara operates at a scale where the energy consumption could affect local grids. How do you ensure that you keep getting the energy supply for the growth of your business?
Well, we are a large flexible load, which is not, when people think about electricity, they want electrons that come out of the plug on the wall.
Right.
Right. And the problem is that the amount of generation you need is scaled to what your peak need is going to be. But we don't consume peak all day long. It's only 2% of the day. The average amount of generation needed on a typical day is about 60% of peak capacity. And so you have lots of underutilized energy. The vast majority of wind and solar energy actually doesn't get sold because of congestion, transmission problems, pricing. All the solar farms are selling electricity at the same time of day, and they're all competing against each other, and you end up with negative energy. And Duke University did a study earlier this year. The AI industry, which is the cause of this huge uptick in energy demand, right? I mean, for 20 years, US energy demand has grown by 2% a year.
Right.
All of a sudden, it's going to grow by 40%. What's driving that? It's AI. Duke University did a study. AI needs 43 gigawatts, more or less, I think it is, over the next number of years. There is 70 plus gigawatts of energy for AI available today with the existing amount of generation if it were flexible 2% of the time. So the answer in our mind is make AI a flexible load. Make it so it responds to demand response. And the only way you can do that is by marrying AI, which in and of itself has a very variable load, with something that's fully flexible, such that you can say, you know what, I need 40% of your energy back, and that flexible load can shut down completely.
So you can plan for it, basically. You know where your peak is, and you,
And in UAE, for example, we operate 250 megawatts of compute in partnership with ADQ and IHC and EWIC, and we are a load balancer. We go up and down depending on what the grid needs to do, and it allows the grid operators to plan more appropriately. We do this in Texas, we do it in North Dakota, we do it in Nebraska, we do it in Finland. In Finland, we even heat 80,000 homes with the heat from our data centers, which is a net energy savings. And we also burn flare gas to generate energy in oil fields, which actually is a methane offset. So I think there's a lot the data center industry can do to mitigate the impact of its demand on the grid. And while I respect my colleagues here who are all about building more generation, by the time that generation is online, AI's demand curve will have changed, I think.
So that's my kind of follow-up questions. There is a big debate on when is this demand going to actually hit? We're talking about, fine, 40%, but is it here already? I mean, are we...
So the impact on the grid is the minute you turn on the data center.
Okay.
So that demand is starting to ramp. It takes 5 years to build some of these data centers. Right?
Okay.
However, the real question is there a profitable business model to use all that compute today? Because that's mostly being used for training.
Yep.
Where you actually get the benefit of AI is in inference, and you want to run inference at the edge. I spoke this morning on a panel with the head of strategy for Aramco. They use inference to determine how they're going to drill. That's not running in a big hyperscaler data center. It's running at the drill site. Inference will happen at the edge, not in the cloud. And so I think part of the problem is people are looking at a very short-term issue and not addressing it appropriately.
Fadi, the voluntary carbon markets are a tool or a way for decarbonization, reducing emissions and making it, I mean, just looking at a commercial path towards that, decarbonization process. Tell us a little bit about that. How is it picking up? What are the obstacles here?
Yeah, so as you see here in my panelists, so we have the hydrogen, we have the nuclear. So as they're building this clean energy, companies and corporates still needs to achieve net zero, right? And for them to achieve that, they need to have an offset mechanism for now to attribute to that until they can achieve, like for the emissions that they're doing. And this is where the voluntary carbon market exists, right? So today, the carbon market just in the kingdom in the last 3 years, we have transacted more than 10 million carbon credits, right? Just in 3 years, we achieved being the biggest carbon market in the region and one of the top 3 exchanges in the world. And this is thanks to our clients, right? We achieved more than like 40 leading corporates in Saudi Arabia. They have a unified approach into decarbonization strategies that they have, and achieving that was all done through the carbon market.
Mm-hmm. And how about in terms of the measurability of it, how commercial is it? Can you just give us kind of a glance at where we are now?
Definitely. So again, to build an infrastructure that helps being a more of a corporate grade solution to them, the way that needs to be achieved is those carbon credits needs to be credible. And the way that VCM works is they work with international standards like ICVCM. They work with rating agency. They work with registries such as Vera, Gold Standard, and Pure Earth to make sure that we only trade the highest credible credits in the region.
Thank you for that, Fadi. Hanyang, I want to go back to renewable energy and kind of examine the fact, could renewable energy intermittently meet the surge in demand in AI? And if we do manage to plan it, like Fred said, understand the curve when things peak, could renewable energy fill that gap?
No, not alone.
Okay.
The kind of electricity demand that's coming in is not normal household loads. It's not refrigerators. It's not street lamps.
Right.
It's AI training clusters.
Yep.
It's hyperscale data centers that hosting national data. It's hospital life support, border security. These systems cannot go down, right? They require always available power. And if they go down, it's introducing vulnerability into national security, right? Right now, we are layering that critical, always-on digital infrastructure on a grid that were never even designed for it.
Right.
Okay? So here's how a baseload national grid looks like, right? On a national scale, you need nuclear, as Doug said. You need solar and wind also. They are essential. They drive down costs. They reduce emissions. Batteries help, but also they're duration limited, and they require resources that only a few countries can hold. Right? So if we are building our critical infrastructure on top of renewables plus batteries, effectively what we are saying is we are happy with putting this critical infrastructure being one weather event away from a complete catastrophe. Or better still, what we've all experienced a couple of years ago, one supply chain shock away from having no replacement part that powers our country. Right? So this is not a stable world. This is not resilient. So when we are building a strong national baseload at a national scale, you need nuclear, as we said. You need natural gas with advanced carbon capture, e-fuel combustion, if that's the correct path, solar and wind, if they truly fit.
So for a country like Saudi Arabia, for example, what do you imagine to be, if we're just doing theoretically, ideally on paper?
I think it'll be all of that.
Okay.
Right? It requires all of those baseload power to carry the civilization forward, right? But when we look at the local facility level scale, so data centers, these local hospitals, local military, on top of the national level, you also need a local independent backup power that is not diesel. Right? So and that's where hydrogen and methanol usually comes in because they're dispatchable, they're scalable, they don't emit any emission. So this is what a strong AI nation power looks like. You know, if we keep layering our digital infrastructure on top of an aging grid, we are introducing national vulnerability into the core of our economics. And we don't have a lot of time to secure and harden this. Right before the next AI revolution comes. And we are continuously building more and more data centers. Yeah. So right now, we've only got a few years to harden the infrastructure now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Doug, with the current administration, how do you engage with them? Which areas do you think that they're cooperating more than others? What do you would like to see, like in terms of policy, that would make your life easier?
Yeah, well, I think top of the list, this administration realizes the U.S. with $38 trillion of debt and a huge deficit, we can't cut our way out of it. We got to grow our way out of it. President this morning in Korea at APEC conference, he's now set the bar higher, 4% GDP growth he thinks we can hit next
Is it
quarter.
possible?
I think it is possible. When you look at the trillions of dollars, he threw a number out of 18 trillion this morning of being invested in the U.S.
Yeah.
It is AI, and no electricity, no AI, no natural gas production, no electricity. I call that the triangle of trillions. And so what the administration is trying to make sure
I like that, triangle of trillions.
those three, those dollars flow today, not in 5 years, not in 10 years. And it's a gift from above for this president that AI fell in his lap, that he has the opportunity to grow us out of this deficit. So their strategy is, how do we get out of your way? And they've got coordination like I've never seen before. They've put together the NEDC, the National Energy Dominance Council, big word that he likes, to help coordinate. You got one-stop shopping of who to call. But the Secretary of Interior, Federal Lands, Doug Burgum, on top of it in coordination. Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy, same page. They just brought in a new chair of the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, Laura Sweat. So you talk to one, you've talked to all of them, and I shouldn't leave out Lee Zeldin, the EPA. They're on the same page. We want to grow the economy. We want to get out of your way. We need AI to happen quickly, because if we don't go quickly, AI is going perhaps to China or going somewhere else in the world. So there's an alignment and there's a motivation to do this now and do it right. You know, the president is a fan of the here and now, and he's a fan of fossil fuels.
He gets things done.
And natural gas. So we got to get the pipelines built. And while, you know, we all see the attributes of nuclear and demand side management, what can we do today, which is probably going to be top of the list?
Today, at this point in time, would you say America is energy independent?
Well, yes, we are. We're an exporter. We are energy independent. We are the largest exporter. We export 30% of our production. So we're well beyond energy independent. 10 years ago, if you took a poll around here, people would say, no way the U.S. can be energy independent. But this thing called hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling put us more than on the path, put us there, which has been driving the U.S. economy. How do we use that to our advantage? We're exporting natural gas to Europe in huge quantities.
LNG, yeah, that's right. Han Young mentioned here, Doug, and I want to kind of touch on this, that Saudi Arabia needs to use all solutions, including nuclear. Do you think it makes sense for Saudi Arabia to have a nuclear facility? What kind of facility? And we all heard, I mean, we've read in the papers about the trip that's coming up with the Crown Prince perhaps going to Washington, D.C. really soon. Do you think that's going to result in a 1, 2, 3 agreement, the U.S. getting involved in projects here?
Yeah, I'll try not to break too much news. I think
let's start
with the first question. The short answer is absolutely. So on any given day, Saudi Aramco pumps 11 million barrels of oil. Of that 11 million barrels, 1 million barrels is used to power desalination plants. So if the kingdom were to build a large 2.4 gigawatt plant here and could transfer, instead of burning oil, to nuclear to power that, they'd be selling 365 million barrels in the open market every year, equating to roughly today's cost $23.5 billion. So worst case scenario, and it wouldn't be this, but let's just pretend it costs $10 billion to build a plant here. At the end of Q2, they'd be profitable. So you work for a publicly traded company, there's not a person in the world that wouldn't take that deal. I think, the GCC, we've seen it work in the Emirates. I think the kingdom is very keen to build nuclear. They see, as they build more and more, they do have a demand problem. They're probably 30 plus gigawatts already in the hole for what they need to make to meet for demand here. They want to build data centers. If they really want to light a fire under this, building nuclear is where it's going to be at. The good news is the Crown Prince and the President have a tremendous relationship. I think the Biden administration got it very close. I am wildly optimistic that the negotiating team that Secretary Wright has been leading is super close. I think we know that energy is one of the pillars of the talks coming up on November 18th. So we're, knock on whatever this is, that nuclear will be part of that. So
You don't see the obstacle being that 1, 2, 3 agreement?
My belief, there will be an agreement. This president is, I think you said it really well. I mean, he is streamlining things. I think there will be an agreement that will be safe, keep both parties happy, but perhaps will be a bit of a hybrid that meets the letter of the law, but meets also kind of the spirit of the cooperation that has gone between these two countries for so many years. So.
And compared to other technologies, if we're looking at Russian nuclear technology, Chinese nuclear technology, how is American technology different? Why should Saudi Arabia use American technology?
So it's really not so much a technology problem, although we think that what we're bringing to the market, particularly with our proprietary operating system, will be the standard for the world. I think the reason that, and we saw this when, I was literally in this building 5 months ago when the president came on his trip. I think the reason the kingdom will fully embrace nuclear technology and nuclear experts is it's kind of a 3-for-1 win. The 3-for-1 would be one, he immediately gets brownie points with the president on investments in the United States. Two, those investments will result in the creation of tens of thousands of American jobs, which our president is obviously going to like very much. But three, just as importantly for the kingdom, is they really try to build their own systems here. What we've committed and what we've been working very closely with the government here, we are going to train the operators of their plants today in America that will then transfer here to operate them tomorrow. So as a result, they're going to have 3 wins out of this relationship.
Fred, you mentioned that Mara is using stranded and underutilized energy resources like flared natural gas. You're using renewables as well. How do you see that strategy evolving?
So for us, if you think about a wind farm, for example, a typical wind farm produces energy maybe 30% of the day, and of that energy, less than 10% of it is sold depending on the market constraints and the congestion in the marketplace, at a profit. And so there's a lot of idle energy. We can operate fully dispatchable compute at that site and use every single electron that can't be sold at a higher price. And we believe so much in that we've actually bought wind farms. And so what we do is we take equipment that we operate, which is current generation technology. We operate it in a grid-attached place where we're paying a traditional PPA. After 3 years, that equipment is fully depreciated. We move it to a wind farm where the marginal cost of energy is 0 and the equipment is fully depreciated. So I essentially can do work, compute, at near 0 cost. And if you look at the world of AI going forward, you won't need millisecond response time on a query for every single job you're doing. The vast majority of inference will be able to be done on a mid-range response time of under a second, which means you don't need to do it in a hyperscaler data center with terabit-sized fiber right next to where you're operating. You can run it in the middle of the desert off of solar energy in a data center with just high-speed fiber connection between it. And so we believe there's a place for all the renewable energy that's been made.
Yep.
I think a lot of renewable energy was built around the world believing that hydrogen was going to be the viable option to use that energy. The problem with hydrogen is it's really hard to transport.
Yeah.
And if you take one, think of it this way. If you take 100 watts of solar energy, you make hydrogen and then you turn that hydrogen back into energy, you only get 17 watts of energy out of it.
Sure.
Very inefficient.
Yeah.
And so the best use for a lot of the existing renewable energy that today doesn't operate at a profit, especially when you take the government subsidies away from it, is put data centers at the site of generation,
right,
and then use technology to move the data back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think that's a much better use. And that lets you take this slack that exists in the grid today, in the energy generation, for data centers, which gets you, according to that Duke study, it covers you for the years until all this nuclear stuff gets built, until the other infrastructure gets built. And I think, it's a little bit of a, there's been a cattle call to go build hyperscaler sites.
Right.
And I think even the capital providers today are saying, what's the value of this going to be in 5 years, really?
Sure. It's hard to determine that now,
Hard to determine, and I think there's a risk we're overbuilding, and then the lag time that it takes, even if our nuclear colleagues here can get stuff built, which is 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah. Doug, you want to say something?
You made an awesome point, and I think it intersects with the point you made. One of the things, there's a piece of legislation, if the U.S. government reopens, it's called the Co-Location Act, which will address exactly what we've been talking about, and how we bring all these things together. Because, I mean, we at the nuclear company, we believe in it all. Right now, we can't afford to wait, and this piece of legislation directly addresses that. So in the United States, on disturbed lands where we already have natural gas going, or coal, et cetera, we will co-locate, we will put wind, we will put other things. And so I think that's the challenge. The one thing on this energy use stuff, we actually think data center use we also agree is going to go down because we think chips will get more efficient, et cetera. But overall, demand on the system is still going to increase. I mean, projections are a 30% growth worldwide.
Sure.
Even
it's another U.S. or another Europe, coming
exactly.
in.
That would be the total consumption of the U.S. and the EU all combined today. But you make such a great point. Like everything should be on the table. Like tap into all of it. And selfishly for us, we are going to bring these plants online. We're excited to bring 18 plants online in the U.S. or whatever it happens to be, Central Europe and all of that. But the world is nuts not to be super creative and look at all these other solutions in the meantime while we do it.
Go nuclear all the way. That's Fedi. I want to come to you now and ask about kind of unlocking financial resources that could support voluntary carbon markets. How do you think we can unlock that?
Like we know that climate finance plays a major role in building clean energy. Unfortunately, today, only 15% of that climate finance goes to emerging markets. And this is where the carbon market can play a pivotal role in financing those projects around where it's actually needed. Like the carbon market can grow super fast. Just there's a report from McKinsey where just the removal part of the market, so for removal of carbon, can grow up to 1.2 trillion by 2050. So just having that finance getting redirected to clean energy, renewable energy, is a big factor where it can achieve that.
For sure. Well, we have an audience question right now. I think there's a QR code that should appear. So please scan it and answer the question, is innovation enough to secure energy security? Yes or no? And while you do that, I have a kind of very fast question for everyone here on the panel, so I can 10 seconds, 20 seconds each. Do you think if we come back next year, next FII, are we going to be talking about the same problems? We're going to be talking still about energy security. We're going to be talking about how to meet the demand, coming up with solutions. Is this going to still be relevant, or we're going to kind of crack the code?
Well, with the current development in geopolitics, I think the question will continue to ongo. But hopefully, the topics that I talked about, coordinated globalization between trusted industrial partners, that will be that will gain more solid track.
Thank you, Hanya. Doug?
I think it'll be much of the same. That this is not going away. The hyperscalers are spending collectively over $500 billion a year on this. That's not going away. These are the biggest balance sheets in the world. And so I don't think we're going to have innovation in 12 months from now. And I think we're going to be focused on the same question. How can I get electrons today? Because I've spent all this money and I've got to activate my data sites.
Doug?
Yeah, I think in a year from now, we're going to be talking about the nuclear renaissance and the excitement around opening the first plant. Now, you left that
to open. You told me in 6 years.
Surprise.
Yeah.
No, I think some of the stuff, but I guess I'm always the optimist. I hope we're not. I hope we're addressing the next problem.
Sure.
I mean, I just have spent the last 3 months traveling the world at these conferences, like AI. Hopefully we're talking about kind of the next exciting new thing, the next breakthrough in medical engineering. So I'm going to go with the optimism that we'll have a new set of topics.
What do you think?
I think when we come back next year, we will be faced with the reality that there is a tripolar world out there, and the global south will have come into its strength.
Yeah.
With that happening, it's completely realistic that the countries in the global south that have the resources and the ability to deploy energy, low-cost energy, build and deploy it quickly, that they will become the dominant location for where sovereign AI will want to be operated. And I'm hugely optimistic about what's going to happen here in this country specifically, and if you look at Vision 2030 and the implications of that from an energy perspective, I'm hugely optimistic about this part of the world.
Fedi.
I believe that for us to build in the infrastructure and the growth that is happening, we need to use every energy that's in our hand today, right? And again, we always have a lot of options to offset our emissions throughout the voluntary carbon.
Great. Well, let's get the result for the poll here. Is innovation enough to secure energy security? No. Yes or no? Let's see if we have the results.
No votes.
We need to innovate on
Anyone?
our poll taking.
No one voted.
I don't think enough people voted.
Let's blame the app. We'll blame the
Oh, it's
QR
not
code.
working? Okay.
Not
Technology problem. We're
Raise your hands.
Technical
right.
difficulty.
Raise your hands. Is it enough? Yes? Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. A few yeses. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. We're good. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be talking about how the world's largest industry is being transformed through 3D printing. So I'm one of the co-founders of Cobot, and we manufacture large-scale machines to transform the world's largest industry. If we look at the global, if we look at the world right now, there is a major housing crisis. 300 million homes are estimated that need to be built by 2030. That's almost 100,000 per day. Prices of housing have increased drastically in some areas by 40% in just a decade. People are getting priced out and so forth. So there's a major housing crisis. And one of the reasons for that is because of how we build. Because no matter where you look in this world, construction has been done and is being done the exact same way we've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's very manual, it's very time consuming, there's a lot of waste involved, and all of this is driving up the cost. It's delaying projects, it takes longer and longer, and it's not the most sustainable business there is. So our company has a vision to transform that and let the machines do the hard labor. So we use large-scale 3D printers like these in order to make construction cheaper and faster by utilizing a crew of just down to 3 people per construction site to make homes, data centers, and other application areas. So this is how they look. This is a middle-sized 3D printer. And now I'd like to show you just how that looks from first layer to last layer of a project. Here you can see the 3D printer being installed. And then the building is being extruded layer on top of layer to create a physical structure. You can see here how other workers, they come in and they work in unison with the equipment, in this case the electricians. This project here is 400 square meters, around 4,000 square feet. It's in 3 floors, and you have 5 families living in this building. Fully permitted. Germany, they have very strict building standards, but you have people living in it. So that's how it looks. And so why do you want to build with 3D printing? Well, I think there are 6 good reasons. Number 1 is cost savings. Because you have fewer people on site and you reduce the amount of materials being used, some of our customers are now seeing cost savings of 10 to 20% per build. And this industry is only 5 or 6 years old. Number 2, printing faster. Some of our customers claim to be printing homes now 30 to 50% faster than with laying bricks or with doing wood-framed homes. Design freedom. You get full customization of design because the 3D printer can move unhindered in 3D space. Number 4, you reduce the amount of waste on site to effectively 0 because you only print what you need. It's very durable because you use real concrete. Also makes it easier to permit. And then lastly, it's highly scalable. There is a project in the Middle East that's going to start very shortly. That's over 40,000 square meters. I'm going to show you that in just a second. So this is where we sell our equipment. We're based in more than 35 different countries. We have a big presence in the Middle East as well. There's a lot of great projects that have been done in the kingdom. I want to show you a few examples of what's being done with this tech. We have hundreds of different application areas. For people, we're talking housing, that's both affordable and high-end. 3D printed schools, Starbucks have started 3D printing restaurants, offices, that's a mosque that was 3D printed here in the kingdom, and so on. To the more industrial commercial structures, like data centers, warehouses, wind turbine towers, water tanks, bridges. The Department of Defense in the US, they also have one of our machines for printing barracks and other similar structures. So there is a wide range of different applications this is being used for. Let's just deep dive into a few of the important ones, starting with housing. Here you have 5 or 6 different types of houses from 6 different continents. And you can see this was all done with the same machine, but the output you get is very, very different. The one you have down there in the bottom left-hand corner was done an hour or 2 from here, a 3-story villa that was 3D printed fully by a machine. That was not done by human hands, the shell of it. Other application areas are data centers. You might have heard the word AI being tossed around here today a few times. That's driving up a huge need for data centers, and there is a specific need for more modular, local data centers that could be built faster. Here's just an example of that, a data center that was printed in Germany. It's a very small module, less than 1 megawatt, but it's in the city center, and that's why you can see that they wanted to optimize the design. So in the back, the building to the right is actually a kindergarten, and so there's no need for a data center to look like a boring big old rectangle. Why not create these beautiful curvatures at the same cost of doing it just in a straight line? But they print faster and cheaper than conventional data centers using this technology. Another example here are these water tanks that were printed in Kuwait. There is a huge need for water access across the globe, so this is one way to store it. The beautiful thing about 3D printing these water tanks is that in this way that it did it here, they reduced the amount of material used by 25%. And the way they did it was to make the walls thinner as you go up, because the water pressure is lower at the top. That's enabled by the 3D printer. If this had been done the conventional way, with say, you form a water tank in place, the wall would have the same thickness from top to bottom. But that's not needed because the water pressure is much, much bigger at the bottom. And so here they reduce the amount of material, the concrete, by 25%. The last project that I wanted to present is a very big one. This one is going to be printed in Qatar. So it's 2 schools for girls, around 40,000 square meters each, so that's more than 400,000 square feet. And you can see here how the design it's such a beautiful design. It mimics the ripples that the sand gets when wind passes above it. And that is fully enabled by the 3D printer. They're going to start that project in the coming months. But if you are to do a 40,000 square meter school project like that, you also need a very, very large 3D printer. So moving forward, the industry is going to scale with much, much larger equipment, such as the 3D printer you see here, that can print up to 15 meters in height. That's 5 stories, more than 30 meters in the width, and then 100 meters in the length. So imagine the scale benefits, imagine the cost and the speed benefits when you start applying robotics in the world's largest industry, which is also the least automated industry. So we think the future is very, very bright for construction when you start applying robotics, AI, and other futuristic technologies. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, not as bad as Scottish. Yeah.
Merci.
السلام عليكم.
Adjusting the socks.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm very, very pleased to be moderating this very important panel and discussion about the Saudi banking sector. Arguably the engine of the economy, serving both the mega projects as well as digital inclusion. I'm honored to be joined here by leaders from the sector, starting next to me with Mr. Mohammed Freh, who is the CEO of STC Bank, pioneering digital bank in the kingdom. Mr. Abdulaziz Al-Anezan, CEO of Bank Al-Bilad, Sharia compliant bank known for its strong retail foundation and agility in the face of quickly evolving regulation. Mr. Tony Cripps, CEO of Saudi Awal Bank, or SAB, who is bringing international experience to the kingdom and helping SAB become a lead in project finance and ESG-led transformation in the kingdom. And last but not least, Mr. Esse Safir, the CEO of D360 Bank, a Sharia-compliant digital bank born in the kingdom. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining. And we have a lot of topics to cover in a short time, so we will try to cover different aspects of the banking. Starting with Mr. Abdulaziz, you know, you talk a lot about diversifying funding sources. And in your annual report, you specifically talk about how that's the only way to sustainable growth for the banking sector. Today, there's a widening gap in the kingdom between the loan demand growth and deposit growth. The mega projects, the Vision 2030, all the ambitions of the kingdom are driving that demand. What avenues are you tapping to address that challenge?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here today, and I would like to thank the organizers as well for a successful FII 9. I think this is very well recognized now. There is no doubt that Vision 2030 and what comes out of it in terms of project finance, including the boom in the housing sector, requires funding from the banking sector. And as you know, there is a growth for the last few years, very heavy growth in the housing sector that led to the housing sector funding is representing almost 30% of the bank's balance sheets. And that would require banks to look for alternative venues for funding, be it enhancing the product offering, enhancing their customer experience to attract new customers. As you know, as part of Vision 2030, the saving we have to reach by 10% by 2030. So I think overall saving schemes to have more of stable deposit base in the banking sector. And in addition to that, of course, banks will have to look at the interbank market, where they can strengthen their FI relationships to access the repo market for short-term liquidity. I think that's one avenue as well. And we have seen also the activity in the capital market lately. The capital market issuance this year in Saudi alone is reached, by banks, reached about 70 billion riyals, which shows really we can close the gaps for the long-term financing, more stability, more capital for banks. So I think, there is definitely a continuous demand on the growth, but I think there are venues for funding these demands. Thank you.
Tony, from your perspective, you've been heard to say that the growth continues to be robust despite these challenges. So from your perspective, A, how are you addressing the liquidity challenge? And B, is the liquidity challenge coupled with asset quality challenges? Are you seeing distress? Are you concerned about any aspects?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. So to answer the last question, no stress. It's fine. I sleep well at night. It's okay. Saudi is going through a normal process of deregulation, which I've seen. I started my career in the 80s. I saw it in Australia and then Singapore and Hong Kong and even in London. It's a natural path where you start with very fast growth and then you have to solve the capital markets issues around that. And the way in which you do that is being done currently in Saudi, but it's only just really started in the last 3 or 4 years. And we've seen Saudi banks tapping the international markets. That's normal. But what we're seeing on the ground is really interesting. The government's very aware that you need to establish a yield curve that's visible and liquid. So that's the starting point, which is happening under the Debt Management Office. And that's developing. And then after that happens, you can create different products. You can create a securitization industry, which is also happening under the housing SRC. They've already issued their first bonds. And then additionally, you've got a really interesting development that's happened in the US since the financial crisis, which is the development of private credit. So the size of the private credit market in the US now is massive. And it's one of the reasons why the banks in the US are liquid and the economy is strong and growing. So as those things develop in Saudi, we personally don't see an issue around the tightness of funding, because it will start to alleviate as those things develop. So the demand is, yes, everyone knows it's far in excess of bank capacity, But as those things come in and more foreign investment comes in and the Saudi market opens up, not just to institutional money, but also retail money from around the world. And that's already started as well. So we don't see it as a challenge.
So there are enough sources to address the growing demand.
Yeah.
Now, staying with the point on asset quality, the housing reforms, are they going to lead to cooling off? Are you pricing that in? Do you see any challenges in terms of the mortgage portfolios that you have with the recent reforms?
It's probably slowed down a little bit, just as people try and digest the changes, the freeze in rents, the land tax. But we still see a very strong pipeline in demand, and we still know that Riyadh's population is growing, and home ownership is also growing. I think the land tax issue will throw up opportunities as people who own land that's not being used for anything will want to put construction on it to minimise the tax impact. And that may create issues down the track if there's an overcapacity in a certain area, commercial buildings as an example. But the housing market itself, the retail mortgage market is very strong, and it's very secure. The infrastructure is terrific, and we're very positive on it.
And we need the catalyst.
Yeah, yeah.
If I may add to this, just a point to Tony's point. I think one thing that is different here in Saudi Arabia is that for residential mortgages, it's mostly for first home owners.
Yes.
And that differentiates really the Saudi market from other markets. We've heard, for example, people talking about what happened in Florida, what subprime, or what happened in Dubai, and all of this. But Saudi market is different. First home owners, the loan to value has appreciated, so you have really deep loan to value. So I think the risk on residential mortgages is very limited, very contained.
You're starting at a very low risk to begin with.
Exactly.
Yeah. But another aspect of reform, and Tony referred to it, is the enabling mortgage-backed financing by SAMA. How are you seeing that change, Abdulaziz, the real estate financing market?
Well, I think, as we mentioned earlier, we have reached almost 700 billion riyals in home loans. And I think, establishing the SRC, that was one way out to offload some of these mortgages. I think the total underwriting is about 50 billion riyals, if I'm not mistaken. But there are further steps needed to further develop the capital market to enable, securitization with different asset classes, with different, I would say, for different segments in the markets, to attract retail investors, to attract pensioners, to create, a secondary market for these MPSs, to be able to really have a two-way market. Establishing the SRC by itself is one thing, but also developing the ecosystem around it and having risk actively traded in the secondary market and giving people easy access for investors to these residential mortgages, I think will help in really continuous growth of the mortgage-backed securities.
But you as banks also need to develop the internal capabilities and systems to do that.
That's right. But not just commercial banks. I think commercial banks, APs, and of course together with the regulators, whether it's CMA or SAMA.
And as we talk about all this growth, which is great from the point of view of the P&Ls of the banks, we're also looking at looming cuts in interest rates, today's included potentially.
Are you expecting a cut today?
I'm not one to
I've
comment
already
on
said
cuts.
yes on live TV, so I hope it happens.
The last I read is there may be one, but not as big as Trump wants.
Okay.
So I leave it at that. But from your perspective, do you see contracting NIMs? How are you preparing for for potential rate cuts?
I think the interest rate cut will be definitely beneficial for corporates.
Yeah.
Because they will have access to credit. They will have improved in margins. So that will accelerate maybe the lending in the corporate side. For banks, it depends how banks are positioned for that. If they are proactively managing their interest rate risk, then I think this will be welcome because that will improve actually the NIMs.
Yeah.
And if they have extended duration, if they have active treasury, I have my treasury team here in front of me, and they're smiling, so hopefully they are well positioned for that.
Yes.
So I think banks will benefit if they are proactively managing this risk as part of their overall balance sheet management, as part of their overall interest rate management. But overall, I think it's going to be positive.
And Mohammed, for you, SMEs is a client, and this easing of prices, it presumably helps with expansion and is a positive for them. How do you rate this development?
First, I'm glad to be on the stage in such a great event. When it comes to the SMEs, I think the prices reduction definitely will end up by a positive story. We believe that there will be an energy injection into SMEs growth plans. Banks will be the major catalyst that will enable such movement for SMEs. What is really important for the SMEs to realize the positive story is to convert that to a better innovation and a better movement into their business and growth plan. It's better employment rate. So the contribution for the prices reduction should end up by the best positive story ever. What we see today as a banks also, we are not looking at them as only a lender, let's say player. We're looking at them to be as a real strategic partner who will guide them into the right way forward to ensure the sustainability for these businesses. At the end, the banks should think in a very smart way to enable all the SMEs with the right products. We're not gonna offer, let's say, a one-size-fits-all product. We'd like to think about certain tailored products about, for example, supply chain financing, point-of-sale financing that will be linked to the SME performance and will allow the SMEs to move forward with a better lending and a better growth and a better sustainable system that will stay forever. I believe today also with the prices reduction that could happen, I'm talking about it from the ecosystem balance. We don't want one party to win the game alone. We want the whole ecosystem to win the game with a balanced formula that will allow banks to gain, SMEs to gain, and the whole ecosystem within the country to gain. So I believe from that angle, prices reduction maybe on the short term could hurt some parties, but definitely on the long term, it would give us a better sustainability for our ecosystem, better sustainability for our SMEs, and a better financial growth for our banks. We don't want to live in a market where the prices are beyond the capacity of the SMEs. We want a very fair environment that will allow all parties to gain. And I believe this is going to happen within Saudi Arabia, with the momentum happening today within the whole banking ecosystem. The growth and the momentum happening for the SME in Vision 2030 also will give them that edge. In total, I look at the story in a very positive way, and I believe there will be a big gain for all stakeholders.
And you talked about designing products specifically for SMEs, and it talks to agility. With that, maybe I move to USA and ask you about why a digital-only bank? What's the benefit? Traditional banks are making strong headways in the digital space. So tell us about your perspective about why a digital-only bank. What's the benefit?
That's a tricky question, I think. Definitely, traditional banks have done a great job, and I think apps are already good everywhere, right? So if you would ask a customer what's the difference, probably our customers would say the service, the ease of use, how simple it is to work. For example, if you want to transfer money to another country, to the UK or to India, from your app, 2 clicks, we will let you know how the money's out. 97% of the transactions will be there probably in 4 minutes. Your money's in the UK, we ping you. So very simple. But I think the massive difference and probably the secret sauce of digital banking in the world is just technology. And it's the fact that having no legacy, we can operate under an operating model that is really asset light and low cost. Asset light because we don't need to have a huge number of assets tied to activities that are not core for us. For example, just picture hundreds of branches with the big branches with the parking and the air conditioning and the main offices with the big building, the logo, and thousands of employees. or the server farms. Server farms actually on-premise are big buildings with servers inside that every 3 years they're obsolete. So you need to throw everything away every 3 years. So all of that consumes. So when you price a product, you need to price that in, right? So eventually for customers, we said customers see great UX, ease of use, but also they see, which they love, lower fees. And I think the trick is that we can be profitable, make money. So DC60, we have every single product we have is profitable. By definition, we don't have like loss-making products because we have very low cost base. So we can be profitable. And what we do is that advantage, at cost advantage, we pass it on to the customer. That's the main difference. Now, as another enabler of the technology besides the low cost, when you are cloud-based and you can have a lot of information stored in the cloud, where you compute and you store apart, you can do real-time computing. So what we can do is, like we do now with a loan, without salary assignment, you apply with a loan, you get it done in probably 3-4 minutes, 5 minutes with everything, with the Sharia compliance process, with the promissory note, with the back with a commodity, all done. That's how hopefully we can team up and start bridging that gap of the penetration of personal lending in the kingdom, which is very important. As we said about the vision and SMEs, the same thing applies to retail, right? To bridge that gap by 2030 in terms of lending to individuals.
And you've done this, both traditional and digital, actually, globally, Europe, US. How do you see it different from what you see in terms of digital banking and the rise of digital banking in the kingdom, specifically?
I think the main difference with the kingdom, I think, and Abdulaziz, you talked about how mortgages are different here, and probably people understand how different.
You know, I have difficulty hearing you, by the way. They hear you, I can't. Because of the noise around.
I can hear, I'll pass it on.
Because I'm shouting here. How the mortgages here are different. You know, mostly first-time mortgages and the loan to value is different. I think the kingdom actually is a bit of a unique, rare abyss in the world, and as foreigners we always see that, right? So first, and everybody talks about that a lot, but the youth of the population, probably 70% below, 35 years old, and the growth rates. So for example, banking sector is growing double-digit every year, and the profits double-digit. So when you find a country that grows so much and so young, usually it's an underdeveloped country where there are a lot of other risks. Well, this is a developed country with growth rates. This is a unique quadrant, right? We are there alone, as in the kingdom. And that has a lot of still runway, because if you think about, for example, about 17% of Saudis have a credit card. The world is at 50, 80%. So we have probably a double-digit growth rate for 10 years more. So that's unique. When you combine that with the fact that the young people are educated and are crazy digital. This is a country where if you're kind of okay with a podcast, you're going to be top in the world. That's unique. And that's what happened when we gave them a digital platform, which is banking, digital bank. In 10 months, we already have 2 million customers at D360, which is amazing. It's amazing. So I think the main difference is that we are alone in a quadrant, but the secret sauce is not that. And that, as a foreigners, believe me, it's shocking. This country has a vision, and every citizen, you're mostly non-Saudis on this side at least, when you live in this country, even if you're not Saudi, you get a message every year. When you're about to discuss your bonus with your managers, it's just the government sending you their KPIs, how they did the year with a roadmap, and how each minister is doing. So it's a country run with a relentless execution, with a vision. And I think nation building at that quality, you don't have in other places. So if you want to go digital on anything you do, this is, I think, a unique place, a unique opportunity, unique timing in the world.
It's an incredible amount of transparency and inclusion for the whole economy, from citizens to banks to corporates.
Crazy. And then the underlying digital infrastructure of the kingdom, the way we can open accounts, how identity is managed. I mean, it's so well done, you wonder why all other countries are not copying it right away, right? So it's a very unique environment.
Tony, you've also talked about symbiotic relationships between digital and traditional banks. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so when I started in technology in the late 90s, the question was in banking, will the internet catch on? Does anyone? So you were thinking, I went, yeah, I think it probably will. So I ended up as head of technology. And back then, what we saw was digital challenges in certain areas in the banking industry. One of them was FX. And so these FX platforms were popping up everywhere, and banks were saying, well, what do we do? And the answer was collaborate with these platforms. And ultimately what happened was we helped them be lower cost than they would have been otherwise, because we provided the back-end clearing and the back-end price discovery. What they captured was a client base that we quite possibly weren't even going after. So it was a win-win. It was, as you said, symbiotic. So I think it's the same thing today, and we've spoken about it. There's a complexity in traditional banking that you need, which digital banks want to avoid. And back-end services like that can help. Product support can help. If they didn't want to do a credit card and we gave them our Saab credit card and the DBS brand was on it, well, fine. So I think it creates partnership opportunities as opposed to threats.
And staying with the partnerships, taking it beyond just banks, you've talked about partnerships between fintechs and other technology providers. What kind of partnerships do you envisage there?
So I think the world is exactly, we talked with Tony, first the growth of the market opportunity is such with SMEs, corporates, and that you will see probably the next 5 years, all of us, signing partnerships, doing things together. In the past, you would said that's not happening. In the case of digital banks, because we have the infrastructure in the cloud and we can publish our APIs, what we're doing at DT60 is trying to be the bank of the fintech world, right? So the vision calls for, I think, like 500 fintechs up and running by 2030. We are nearly there. I think like 300 already. It's going super fast. So fintechs need access to the banking ecosystem, everything you name it, from the ACH to issuing cards, etc. For us, that's very straightforward. So we are working today with about 7 or 8 companies already being their bank, banking as a service. So I think in the future, to Tony's words, I mean, the fintechs, digital banks, and traditional banks, there will be an ecosystem, and we will all be much more interconnected, absolutely.
If I may add to this just one point, I think the partnerships is very important, but without the regulatory landscape that will facilitate these partnerships through open banking, through banking as a service, and all of this, wouldn't be possible. We have in Saudi Arabia today, we have the government and you have the private sector. You have the private sector actually is leading the digital transformation. Here in Saudi Arabia, we have the government actually is leading the digital transformation.
Yes.
So without the regulatory framework and landscape, I think that wouldn't be possible to really integrate into these platforms.
No, and Saudi's been at the forefront of digital in terms of the government and enabling, whether it's open banking or otherwise, 3-4 minute approvals don't happen without a centralized credit system, right?
Actually, this is a country where talking about the regulation. So when I came for the first time, you have these big events for fintechs that happen every year in the country, and having you have a minister and SAMA governor opening, and actually they talk about how we should go for innovation. They talk about moving forward, right? So there is a lot of really pull from them for us to move forward. So I think that's going to help a lot, and that's why it's going to go fast. But eventually, the role of the banks, we should be able to move the money from the people in the retail side, all this capital into the system. And there are many mechanisms in the society to do that. I mean, definitely capital markets is one of them. But the moment we can funnel all that and be the bank of those fintechs, that's when the economy can start prospering, right?
You're widening the funnel and getting more.
When our balance sheet is available for them, so they can do anything with our balance sheet. So the possible the people they multiply themselves. That's going to be, I think, an engine of growth in the kingdom, absolutely.
Mohammed, turning to you, and we've heard a lot about how, Saab and Bank al-Bilad are navigating the challenges to contribute to the growth and facilitate it. How do you see STC Bank's role in contributing to Vision 2030?
I believe Saudi Arabia moment is now, and STC Bank was built to really enjoy this moment. So we believe that the foundation for STC Bay from the beginning, and then the foundation of STC Bank was meant to align with Vision 2030. and our alignment with Vision 2030 by building an ecosystem bank that will drive the show and to be an infrastructure player within the country. We don't look at ourselves as a traditional bank or only as a digital bank. We believe STC Bank is an infrastructure player who's going to enable all the pillars for Vision when it comes to the financial sector. We're talking about financial inclusion, cashless society, SME, I would say, development. So if you'll go back to STC Bank's strategy, you will find out the 3 pillars are really an integral part of STC Bank's strategy. So we are fighting days and nights to make sure that our contribution from STC Bank towards the vision, ambition in financial sector has been fulfilled. And when I look at STC Bank today contribution, I could easily say that we have tackled untapped segment in the market. Believe me, 5, 6, 7 years before, a lot of segments, we can name them youth, blue collars from the personal banking side, SMEs with all their scales from corporate side, they were not served as it's being served by STC Bank. And our value proposition and the way we are building our product and services to serve the untapped segment is running under the umbrella that we want to accelerate, okay? These segments, I would say, enablement within the Saudi market, we are able to succeed by building up the biggest customer base ever for youth, blue collars, SMEs across all Saudi banks. And this has been also translated when we were trying to move to STC Bank. We have also captured the biggest market share into these segments. So what I meant to say, financial inclusion, cashless society, SMEs, and other pillars of the Vision 2030 were really pioneered by STC Bank, and will keep going with the same spirit, the same momentum, to reach to a level where the targets for the vision gonna be achieved. We are still at the beginning as a bank. We believe the way forward and the vision and the strategy that we are entertaining as we speak will take us somewhere where there will be a great stories to be built for this country. And I'll go back again, we are founded for the vision and will continue to support the vision up to the end.
Yeah, in the SME segment alone, funding gap is estimated at 300 billion credit gap in that space. But let's take that a little bit deeper into your own business and look at your digital model. What are the biggest cost efficiencies and savings that you've realized with this model?
Look, cost efficiency for us, I will not look at it only from reducing the operational cost of the bank. I would look at it as a sustainability pillar that will allow us to build an ecosystem bank driven by a cloud native infrastructure, driven by API infrastructure that will allow us to build our product and services in the fastest way ever, with the minimum cost ever, and to be as fast as the customer expects such product and services to be served in the market. So the way we look at it, we don't look at it only to reduce the cost. We look at it to be a pillar to succeed in our journey, in our strategy, and to make sure that whatever saving gonna happen as a result of that thin and nimble setup with a full agility will be converted for more investment that's going to be reflected into a customer value proposition. So our aim is to gain value from the efficiency and reinvest it back to have a better reflection into our customers. We believe today that the reflection of the efficiency cascaded from the agility and the, let's say, cloud native and API native infrastructure up to middle office, back office, and in one way or other, the cascade happening into such thin layer of infrastructure, ending up by major efficiency into our middle office and back office, and reflected back into a better value proposition, a better customer experience, time for the customer to acquire a product from the bank with the end-to-end digital journey, with the STB kind of transactions. So the value proposition around efficiency, we are always looking at a customer-centric view more than again for the bank itself. And we have seen a lot of success stories happening on the ground where the customer have already realized how the efficiency is adding value to him and the stickiness for the customer, and how the customer is really enjoying our experience, how the customer accessing our application on a daily basis, how our bank is succeeding in a very sustainable way in the Saudi market. I think the efficiency is the main pillar for achieving such targets.
Right. And you mentioned sustainability. We talked about it earlier. I'm obviously going to turn to you, Tony, on this. ESG is a subject that's close to your heart, and you've talked a lot about ESG-driven transformation.
Yeah.
Can you tell us why that is important in the context of banking?
Yeah, I remember 15 or 20 years ago, what the chairman of HSBC said, what's the biggest industry in the next 20 years? And we all went, I don't know, we didn't know. And he said, it's going to be around energy transition. I don't know how he knew that 20 years ago, but so from a financial point of view, financing the transition is a great business. So the sustainable part is easy to work out. And we're, like other banks, very focused on helping customers with that. On the S side, the social side, again, we're a very rich industry, and it would be more than remiss if we didn't help build sustainable societies, fund projects around infrastructure which cleans water or saves the environment. So that's easy. And on the G side, less recognized, if you look at the long history of economic development, it's the countries with the strongest governance infrastructure that succeed over the very long term. So you take the United Kingdom as an example, you take the US as an example, you take Singapore as an example. They've all fundamentally succeeded consistently because of government infrastructure and the ease of doing business. So that's why the G is important. So yeah, it's passionate, and because I believe it creates sustainable growth.
Right. We've talked a lot about liquidity, housing, digital, ESG, and I think obviously each of these topics can have a panel on its own. But maybe just to have a final word from each one of you, what do you think is the single most important lever that will create sustainability and prosperity for this sector looking into the future? Maybe start with USA.
So because we're many, so we'll go for one lever. I think it's very relevant, which is I think the access to credit, at least for both individuals and SMEs. I think if we can deliver that to the kingdom, to the vision, together, and that's probably, I would say, one of, if not the one of the most relevant levers to deliver growth, which is financing all the way from the ecosystem for SMEs, growth capital for entrepreneurs to start, and then for individuals to have a family prosperity, absolutely.
Well, just very quickly, I know we're running out of time, but you can't have a panel and not mention AI. So I think AI plays its part in many areas. In fact, one of us probably should be an AI program next time you have a panel. Be interesting to ask the
AI what they think. Yeah,
thinks
absolutely.
and whatever. But
I did a lot of that
technology
yesterday.
will obviously be a very core part of the financial industry strategy across banks. And yeah.
Well, I guess banks will have to continue to be innovative in terms of their structured finance, IDs, and also in terms of liability generation. And I think using, of course, technology is very important, very key, and using the data as well, and how to penetrate the market. I think that will be, they can help the banks to sustain their growth in the future.
Okay. Ahmed?
I think customer-centric use case would say this could help a lot in making the sustainability.
Second that, we should look at long-term growth. Thank you, everyone, and thanks, everyone, for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
يعطيكم العافية. شكرا يعطيك العافية. يعطيكم العافية. يعطيك العافية. شكرا.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here today to talk about food sustainability, climate, and finance. Over the past few years, and especially since COVID, we all have increasingly realized that global food security is fragile. Shocks, wars, pandemics can easily disrupt the global supply food chain. Other structural factors, such as global population growth, climate change, water scarcity, soil degradation, as well as labor costs, are putting farming under immense stress in all regions of the world. At the same time, consumers want to eat better quality food. They want food which is locally grown. They want food which is easily traceable. And so they expect the agri-food system to transform itself radically beyond mere change in farming. And this is why tech and digital transformation is so important. And it makes farming evolve from traditional farming to precision agriculture with increased efficiency. But how can we balance agri-food tech with sustainability, and what role can finance play? To talk about these issues, we are extremely privileged to have with us Jeremy Koller. Jeremy, a warm welcome. You are the Chief Investment Officer and Managing Partner of Koller Capital, one of the world's largest independent firms dedicated to private equity secondaries. You are also a philanthropist and the founder 10 years ago of FAIR, and you will tell us what FAIR is about. It stands for Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return Initiative. It's a prestigious investor network focusing on sustainability risk and opportunities in the global food system. So my first question for you, roughly 2/3 of consumers are now saying that they feel very strongly about locally grown food. So they are reshaping the geography of food. But as capital and technology pivot to serve this demand, what would you say is the greatest structural risk to the global food system?
It's great to see so many people in the audience. The greatest risk to our food is that it's unsustainable. You know, we're feeding 80 billion animals a year for 8 billion humans. And it's the largest user of fresh water in the world, largest user of antibiotics in the world, risk of zoonotics, as we know. It's more greenhouse gases than the whole transport sector. So there's a big risk to, an unsustainable risk to what we've done with our food system.
Okay, and is it why you funded the FAIR initiative 10 years ago? Can you tell us a little bit more about what it is? And also I've realized that you wrote a paper criticizing the green revolution. Does it mean that you think that tech in agri-food does not have any role to play?
So FAIR, Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return, is the fastest growing sustainable investment network in the world, over $93 trillion. And basically what it does is it's all about materiality, not morality. It bridges the knowledge gap for investors, and the investors engage where they're interested. It's a neutral network. It's just about bridging the knowledge gap. And as I said, it's over $93 trillion. And you asked about technology, and am I against it because we wrote a report about criticizing the green revolution. And what's interesting, I think, about that is, no, technology is vital. We need to feed our citizens, etc. And we need to secure food security. So, NEOM has invested in Liberation Labs. There's 3D printing of meat. There's bioengineering of soil to reduce carbon. And technology is really vital for growing a better food system. The issue is uncontrolled capitalism has led to this unsustainable investment in just producing more chickens, and the zoonotics we're getting from that is we're having to destroy millions and millions of chickens a year because of zoonotics.
So, what
avian flu epidemic is endemic in the US, particularly.
How do you think finance, and especially sustainable finance, can play a role in redirecting and shaping the food revolution?
Yeah, so it's a whole ecosystem of policymakers, business groups, but very, very powerful are investors. Investors control all the companies they're invested in. And I think investors are concerned that, for instance, with antibiotics, that there could be a class action, or regulations could change, or there could be a carbon tax on meat. So for investors in particular, it's all about sustainable profits.
Great. And so do you think that there is different, where do you think the focus should be for investors in this agri-food space? What do you see, for instance, all the different investing firms in your network?
So the network are interested in exploring whether there should be regenerative agriculture, or should technology be included so that we make sure we have food security. There's all these alternative proteins from, we've got a lot of choices now. We can grow meat in the labs. We've got 3D printed steaks that are being sold. And there's cheese that is cultured, that is exactly the same as cheese. But we don't have to do this using animals. We can actually do all this in laboratories and in warehouses, etc.
Okay, so the network is really about focusing on investments which do not cause any harm to animals.
No, no. Investors are neutral.
Okay, right.
So we don't care about animals in a way. Well, it's very interesting because if you're building a textile factory, business people are very interested in protecting their employees. But an investor is fairly neutral on that. The reason we care that there are fire exits and foundations of a building is because it's better business. It's, there's reputational risk, there's insurance risk, and the risk of being shut down because of poor quality. And it says something about actually the management of a company if they're not taking care of that sort of infrastructure.
Issues. Yeah. No, it's very interesting. I work for a asset manager in Paris. Well, it's a global asset manager called Mirova. It's part of Natixis Investors. And we also invest in the agri...
Minerva.
Mirova.
Mirova.
Yeah.
And what does Mirova do exactly?
So it's a global asset manager. It's a pioneer of sustainable finance in Europe. And we invest in all asset classes, including public and private assets. And in the private assets, we have different investments, including a lot in infrastructure renewables. But also we have a fund related to land degradation and agriculture. And I was hearing what you were saying, and I think the scope of the agri-food revolution is so big that it actually requires a mix of technological solutions and precision farming and all the, the new solutions that we have on innovation side, but at the same time, it also requires that we really work with soil and in a localized manner. And so I think there are different solutions according to different regions.
Yeah.
Would you agree? And is it also what you're seeing as part of your network? Because I guess you have investors from all over the world.
Yeah, so, well, just to make a point about technology, if I may, you know, we look at technology and they're talking about putting gas masks on cows. And there are a lot of people telling other people to eat insects. You know, what we've got to do, I think, is if we look at the root cause of the way we've grown our food, you get a very different picture. So we had a wonderful revolution in the 1930s, 1940s, the Green Revolution, where we discovered or invented chemical fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, and genetically modified wheat, genetically modifying grains, etc. And that created an abundance of cereals. And we actually solved, in the US, we solved hunger in the 40s. And we did it with such effect that as the farmers grew richer, there was such an abundance of cereals that suddenly prices fell again and you had farmers going bust. And so they discovered, at the same time we discovered antibiotics, and what we thought we could do, the farmers thought, well, we're creating all these cereals, but we don't have consumers for it. Now that we've discovered antibiotics, why not give them to other animals and to cows and chickens, etc., and fish, and we can continue supplying our cereals rather than looking at should there be regulation to help us with a roadmap of what is sustainable. And so, you know, technology can work both ways. But if you look at the root cause, technology can really benefit, like the Green Revolution, but it needs to be regulated.
So you think regulations can help? And
it needs to be a whole ecosystem of policymakers, the businesses themselves, the owners of those businesses, and consumers.
Consumers. Let's talk about consumers. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, consumers want more locally grown food, healthier food, better quality. Is it what you're seeing in terms of trends worldwide, and is there difference across regions? And what do you think traceability? What role can traceability play?
First of all, I think it's middle class. Is that what, you know, people that can afford to eat better food, etc. I think, you know, there's a lot of the population in the world that just wants protein. And actually, it's weaker and weaker protein because it's been manufactured. So once again, technology. You can put in bioextracts into the proteins to make it better. And I forgot the question.
No, I was
traceability.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what's actually, I think, very interesting. We've had a lot recently on ultra-processed foods and a lot of concern about ultra-processed foods. But that actually starts from when the animal is killed. And I think a lot of us are now concerned about ultra-processed animals and, you know, the antibiotics with girls menstruating at a younger age, at 9, etc., at cancer, at obesity, at diabetes, etc. And I think there's an initiative we're going to start an initiative on, you know, with blockchain, you can have provenance, and if we can have traceability, I think we'd all like to know, are we eating a whole load of antibiotics or hormones, or is there like I think one of the suggestions I would make is on labeling on meat and dairy products. What's gone into these products, and and I think just that transparency, which we're able to do now, the technology's there to do it, could be a demand that consumers will make in the future. And that will affect demand on factory farmed food. Also, subsidies are going very heavily on producing chickens, for instance. So millions and millions of chickens are slaughtered every year, but they're replaced by the taxpayer in the US, basically subsidizing and replacing those birds. So there's not really a true cost of these proteins. And there is a new movement to look at instead of looking at silos about antibiotics or climate or water or deforestation, it's looking at the whole sustainability of our food system and the solutions we can have. The solutions are there for world hunger. We're feeding 80 billion animals a year for 8 billion humans, as I said at the beginning. That is unsustainable as our populations grow.
Yeah. So when you think about the future of food,
The what?
when you think about the future of food,
Yeah.
what is your vision? How do you think it's evolving?
It's in our hands. We have choices. We can put fish on land, or we can grow fish in the lab, or we can just say we'll go back to the future in the sense of just eating less and better meat.
And
we've got all these choices that we can make.
And what do you think will be the key issues affecting the global food systems? Do you think the key problems, challenges?
The key challenges are it's affecting fertility, it's affecting, it's affecting all these horsemen of the apocalypse, as it were. So the real challenge is to, in terms of as we've gone from global to national, is food security. That's a very big challenge, and a challenge of, for humanity's sake, of being on top of the type of food we eat and what we want to grow.
And do you see different regions of the world being affected differently?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Brazil, for instance, they seem a pariah, but actually, the work they're doing on technology, for instance, crop turnover, and then adding bioextracts to the soil to reduce the carbon content. And they could be, for the number of production of animals, they could be 5 times larger in deforestation, but they're using technology to reduce their impact on deforestation, etc. I think we're all becoming aware of it. I'm very hopeful.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, and please join me in thanking him.
Thank you.
Thanks for the great conversation.
Thank you, the lot of Thank you.
Okay, I think we can start now. Today we're going to be talking about disasters, natural disasters. I think all of us now are accustomed to watching natural disaster on TV. We pass by casually and we see people losing their homes, floods, fires, earthquakes, and that shouldn't be the norm. There should be something in this age of technology, there should be something that forecasts, prevents, and is able to respond quickly to people who are in distress. While I was preparing for this session, I came across some very interesting figures. The beginning of this year, the first half of this year, losses from natural disasters, $80 billion. In the United States, from 1980 till 2024, there has been 403 weather and climate disasters, and they cost almost $3 trillion. So something must be done about it. And today we're going to be discussing with my guests. I have with me Mr. Michael Martin, the CEO of Rapid SOS, a global pioneer in emergency data technology, connecting more than 500 million devices directly to first responders. And we're going to talk about that. And I have with me also the Honorable Douglas Mist, Global Head of Public Affairs and Managing Director, MENA at the nuclear company. And also you have also a history working with the Homeland Security in the US. And I think from that, you have an experience with dealing with natural disasters. First of all, let me start with asking you, have there been improvements in the way technology is being used to forecast and prevent or respond quickly to natural disaster? And how much is that improvement? And why haven't we been able to fully be able to forecast and prevent or at least respond quickly? Because from what we see on TV, disaster areas really suffer a lot before relief arrives.
Yeah, so we power 22,600 agencies in a dozen countries, and we just crossed 1 billion emergencies managed. And I think historically, unfortunately, these systems have all been largely analog silos. And so there was no unified system of data where we could train on, learn on. And I think we're in this remarkable moment for AI transformation for how these sorts of operations, and I think you're seeing just kind of baby examples of that, but I'll just give like one small example of the impact of digitization. So Hurricane Katrina is an example. You had over 1,000 fatalities in New Orleans from that disaster. Now, that was purely beholden to a local government response. Hurricane Harvey occurs, similar magnitude storm, horrific flooding in the Houston, Texas area, and social media was around. So you had all these folks that were calling 911, that the 911 infrastructure was fully overwhelmed. There was, New York Times did great reporting on this. There's 60-minute wait times to get through. And you had this private citizen fleet called the Cajun Navy that were actually going and rescuing people. So I think we're in a really interesting moment now where we can harness the digitization and data to actually start to build predictive models on this. I think we're finding certain things are more predictable than others. Wildfires, car accidents, and heart attacks are proving to be quite predictable. I think things like crime are proving still more challenging.
So I will go to Douglas and tell me, from your work, you worked with the government and you worked with the private sector. Is there real collaboration between the public sector and the private sector in dealing with disaster areas?
It's a great question, and the short answer is absolutely. Without them working together, we won't solve it. I think, as DHS got bigger and stronger and FEMA got bigger and stronger, we were able to bring tremendous assets to it, but every asset we brought was manufactured by the private sector. Like every radio we used, every piece of rescue equipment. So they really need to work in harmonization between the two, because no matter how great the private sector is, you still need the muscle of the federal government in the U.S. and vice versa. But even with that, I think the great weakness still, and we're still trying to figure that out, is the human element of it. And no matter how great our tech is, we just saw in Texas, terrible flooding, many children died in these floods. We had the technology to predict it, but the human side of it broke down. Like the government, the local, state and local government, they had the power to save it, but they weren't talking to each other. So I think even with all the advances, and I couldn't agree more, that the AI, they're predicting, we're having all these things, but that last mile, if we don't close the loop on the last mile, we're going to see these catastrophes continue to happen.
Can you share with us a case where artificial intelligence or technology actually was able to save lives and to spare people the distress of disaster?
Yeah, so we support about 550,000 emergencies a day, and so every one of those incidents now, we're seeing data from like your Apple Watch, your camera feeds, connected vehicles, all that data is kind of fused together. We're doing close to 1,000 drone missions a day where we fly an AED, Narcan, and a tourniquet for a medical emergency. One other example is the pre-planning and modeling of this. So in the LA wildfires, we saw the ability of AI to actually predict where these hotspots were going to pop up. And we obviously had 3 horrific fires that were not able to be prevented in time, but there were over half a dozen other fires that were predicted, pre-staged resources, and stop those fires before they got more than 50 acres. So I think we're really on the cusp of seeing AI have a real impact on predicting some of this.
And there's a lot of investment going to this technology. There's a lot of money going to it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, coming from the United States, we are in the thick of the AI moment for sure. And I think you're seeing, I mean, the arguably, I think the most valuable company in the world on a multiple basis is Palantir Technologies, which is applying AI for a lot of public safety and defense use cases. So that's one of many examples right now.
So I have to ask Douglas, are governments spending enough money on early warning systems? Because according to the United Nations, no, they aren't.
Probably not the most popular answer, but I would say no. And I think we're drawing it back. I mean, particularly in the United States, we've seen a drawdown on weather satellites and sort of commitments to the amount of money we need to be spent. I mean, I think, should the money be spent be infinite? I think the wonderful thing, to your point, with AI and others, it's become a whole lot more efficient. But there are a whole lot of things, like starting with in the United States, we put these buoys, particularly way out in the Western Pacific, and also way out into the Atlantic, that are helped to predict for hurricanes, for tsunamis, et cetera. And with the downgrading on that and not sort of putting out the ones that we need, the ability for all that data gets fed in to the AI models that allow them to predict when hurricanes are happening and all that. But they're only as effective as the information they can collect. And if we're not collecting enough information, those models aren't going to be as strong as they can be.
Are disasters today worse than they were before? Natural disasters?
I think the environmental ones, they sure appear to be becoming stronger. I mean, I think we just saw, yesterday, just a terrifying hurricane goes through Jamaica. Sustained winds at around 165 miles an hour, gusting up to 185. I mean, that's a category 5 plus. I haven't seen, basically all communications have been wiped out, so I don't think we've seen an accurate count on fatalities and injuries. Hopefully it won't be too bad, but that kind of severity, you just can't live through that. So it's a pretty terrifying thing. And I think on the LA wildfires, I think we're seeing in the West as a whole, particularly in Canada, more and more wildfires as a result of climate change. Some are man-made cause, down power lines, et cetera. But the severity of some of these fires continues to increase.
Yeah. I think you can't sugarcoat the impact of these emergencies on. I'll just give an example. So, approximately 1 in 3 fatalities in the United States every year will be during an emergency. It's 1.1 million fatalities. And if you think about the last 25 years, there's been unbelievable technology transformation, right? In the last 25 years, we got basically the internet prolific, we got mobile devices, all these technologies, and yet life expectancy in the United States, I'll have the number roughly right, it's increased by 52 days. So it's it's amazing being here at FII and seeing all the technology and innovation, and yet we're struggling to apply that in a way that is actually driving transformed outcomes in the moments that matter most. And I do think this AI moment's going to potentially finally unlock that, but this is a big challenge.
So tell me, how do you overcome the barrier of sharing data from the private tech ecosystem with the government entities? I mean, that is also an obstacle.
Yeah, so we have 50% of the Fortune 10 use our platform, 200 tech companies, Apple, Google, Meta, Uber, Instacart, Grubhub, Amazon, Walmart, et cetera. So I think safety and security is a universal topic. Everyone is, wants to protect their employees, their customers, their users, et cetera. We've seen, Apple, led by Tim Cook, really talk about leading on safety and healthcare technologies, so fall detection, satellite SOS, automated car crash response, the ability to now live stream video from your device through. So I think we're in this building awareness right now, facing some of the climate disasters, the overall safety moment, where big corporations are saying we want to participate in that. And they're spending a ton of money on these systems. If you think about all the cameras, all the alarms, you know, most of our cars will detect a crash automatically. So it's like, you know, the digital infrastructure exists, it just wasn't connected in to our public sector.
I think there was also a grave mistake during the LA fires. They sent warnings to 10 million homes, which were not part of the fire area, right? And I think that caused a lot of chaos, unnecessary. So, I mean, sometimes also technology does not work right?
Yeah, and a lot of the systems, the underlying infrastructure for these emergency response systems, you can probably comment from the DHS perspective, but certainly our experience is they're often pretty legacy. They're procured on RFP cycles on 10 to 12-year processes sometimes. So
Douglas, can private and public sector build like a shared data platform, and at the same time does not compromise the privacy of the government?
You know, it's a great question. In the United States, we rolled out something called CMAS, the Cellular Mobile Alert System, that we negotiated with, at the time, it was Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, et cetera, to let us work with them where you would be geolocated. So you user, you, the three of us, we would have to opt into it, except in a catastrophic circumstance, and then we could override it. But what it would allow was your phone would geolocate you near where the disaster was. So like right now, if there was a fire in New York, I'm not going to get an alert on my phone. It doesn't care. But if, heaven forbid, there was something 2 blocks from here, it would do that. But to your point on the concerns around privacy, it was a long and drawn out sort of negotiation on how to make sure that we protected people's privacy on that data. But from the government's point of view, our argument was the good of the well-being of the population kind of overweighed all of that, because ours was a push system. We weren't trying to snoop on people. We wanted to, if something bad happened, particularly man-made, what really got us thinking on this was an active shooter situation. How do we alert people, don't go to that mall, like get away? And our perspective was saving someone's life overruled someone's potential concern around privacy at that particular moment. If they were able to know, oh my God, I can get away from here and my children will be safe. And we found in the United States that the population totally agreed with that they were okay with having that slight intrusion if it helped protected their families.
So Michael, which is easier to cope with in order to forecast and to respond? Disasters, is it fire, earthquake, or floods? Which is easier? What the technology has helped us to forecast which?
Yeah, I think the meteorological models have gotten increasingly sophisticated, and as you pointed out, like even in the recent disaster in Texas, there was advance notice of that incident, and as I spoke on the LA wildfires, actually, earthquakes are unfortunately not predictable. You are seeing the ability of tech to do some pretty cool stuff. So if you have an Android phone, your phone will detect an earthquake. And so the Android operating system crowdsources that vibrational pattern and will give you like a minute or two head start.
Minutes.
Which in an earthquake ends up being pretty material because most people are injured by falling debris. So you can kind of take cover under a sturdy table or structure and potentially save a life. So I think on the meteorological side, we're getting good. We're facing challenges on getting the word out, notifying people, those sorts of things, that last mile. And the wildfire models are also getting it's a longer conversation, but quite good. And as well as the detection. We support satellite detection now.
So what happened in LA?
I think in LA, you had really a historic set of environmental conditions. Winds were gusting close to 100 miles an hour at peak moments there. So you're talking about hurricane level winds, already with extremely dry conditions. The whole region was in a severe drought. And when you have that combination in these arid climates, it is almost inevitable it's going to happen.
But that's why you have to be ready. I mean, everybody expects to see wildfires in LA when it's dry and arid. So, I mean, that's why they should have been prepared, right?
Well, I think they had done a lot of preparing for it. I think no one had foreseen a scenario where wind speeds were going to be kind of 3 times faster than they had, seen previously. So it was I think the good news is Cal Fire, LA Fire are now they're planning for that eventuality. But yeah, it was an unprecedented moment that had a lot of tragedy.
Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Okay, Douglas, what about you? In your lifetime, you have dealt with 3 disasters, all kinds of disasters. For you, which was easier to respond to and deal with? The fire, the flood, the earthquake? Did you ever have a combination of all 3?
Yes, combination, but I would say the 4th category would be accessibility. And so I think the hardest one when I was at DHS that we dealt with was actually the earthquake in Haiti, because the infrastructure there was already poor. And once the earthquake happened, it was decimated. And so communications completely broke down, no utilities, no airport to land a plane in. So the first 48 more hours, we had to parachute things in. We couldn't even land. So I think that made that one, I think, almost the worst. The closest second, I think, would be Hurricane Sandy, because it's mass. It covered so much territory. It's one thing if LA was horrible, but it was LA. It was relatively confined. Hurricane Sandy spanned hundreds of miles. And so as a result, we were having to respond, almost the entire length of the northeast seaboard of the United States with, horrific flooding, power outages. You weren't able to get fuel in. And once that footprint gets so big, no matter how well you prepare, and that's one of the things where technology has really helped, is what FEMA does is they predict where these storms are coming. They pre-place supplies. They bring in generators. They bring in medicines. They bring in stuff and have it supplied in hardened shelters where they, hopefully they'll survive a bad storm. That storm was so big, it was almost impossible to sort of pre-supply and be able to react to the length of that entire storm.
So we have 3 minutes. I'm going to ask one question to both of you. Quickly, what one single thing you would like to see happen that would help in the relief and the quick response? One single thing.
I think globally we're at close to 30 billion connected devices now. And so, your home knows if it's on fire. Your car knows if it's in a crash. Your wearable device knows if you're having a heart attack. The challenge is those systems don't connect in to all of our response capabilities. So as an example, in the LA wildfires, one of the waste of resources is we didn't know who was in their homes or not. So you had to spend a lot of resources knocking on doors because you didn't know if there was someone who was handicapped or wheelchair bound where they needed help evacuating. So these are things that we ought to be able to just solve immediately. And I think AI is letting us do that. We just need that last mile connectivity. And if we do, as I mentioned, the impact on human longevity and life expectancy could be profound.
So it's connectivity.
It's plugging in all of our already connected systems into our public response capability set.
Okay.
So I think for me, the biggest solution is actually analog, and that's the individual. In countries, everyone should learn CPR, basic first aid, understand that they have a go bag, with medicine, food, et cetera, in it. And I think that itself would have a tremendous amount of success. That I think no matter, and don't get me wrong, I love tech and data and all of that, but no matter how great that is, if the individual isn't better educated and better prepared, if all the alarms are going off, but they're not prepared to get out of there, their car doesn't have gas in it, they don't have safety equipment, they haven't learned how basic first aid, I don't care how great the tech in the world is, they're not going to be able to survive.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank my guests, Michael Market, CEO of Rapid SOS, and Douglas A. Smith, Global Head of Public Affairs and Managing Director, MENA, at the nuclear company. Okay, thank you so much. And I guess we all have to be prepared for any eventuality and connectivity and be ready. And let's hope that technology and artificial intelligence will be able to help us in forecasting, responding, and being able to deal with natural disasters. If we can't deal with man-made disasters, at least we'll be able to deal with natural disasters. Thank you so much.
Please.
Just a little problem.
Oh. We have a logistical challenge. Give us one moment.
Where did it fall? Okay.
Et voila.
Sorry, little problem.
Small logistics. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you for joining us on this panel talking about, can hospitality remain all-weather in a slowing economy? We have a phenomenal panel. I had not realized, coming at this from not a hospitality lens, my background is geopolitics originally, but hospitality has long been seen as the all-weather industry, resilient to shocks, powered by human desire for connection and experience. Today, travel spending represents nearly 9% of global GDP, which is an extraordinary number. Yet global growth is slowing and consumers are more selective. So can hospitality continue to outperform the wider economy? What happens when the world is fragmenting? What makes this industry so resilient? We have three fantastic speakers. Bedor Al-Rashudi, the CSO of Suda Development, and anybody who doesn't know Suda Development, I highly recommend you look at it. It's extraordinary. Paolo Barletta, the CEO of Arsenal Spa, excuse me, on the far end. We decided to mix it up a little bit. And in the middle, we have Manfredi Lefebvre. Try again. Lefebvre, apologies. Dovidio. I'm getting there, the chairman of Heritage Group. Paolo, let me start with you, if I may. Tell me what's changing at the high-end luxury side of the hospitality space. What are people looking for today?
First of all, good morning, everyone. I think that today people, especially after COVID, understood how precious is our time, which is the opportunity to travel, the privilege that we have to travel. And I think that today, after COVID, we realize that traveling is creating your own memories, sharing these memories. And these memories, they do not finish when you finish your travel. When you buy a luxury goods, it can be a car, it can be a watch, it can be a clothes. You have passion in the moment that you buy and maybe in the moment that you're wearing it. But when you are traveling, you bring those emotions with you for the rest of your life. You will tell to your children, in the future your children will tell to their children. So it's an investment on happiness and memories. And I think that in the luxury, like in all the other segments, what people are trying to achieve now is incredible experiences that when they go back home, they can remember, and when they think to those experiences, they are happy. And so they give them happiness, even in a moment far from when they travel in that specific time.
But is that changing? Hasn't always been that way?
Actually, it should have, but it wasn't, because people before COVID, they didn't have the perception on how much was missing the possibility to not travel. And especially after COVID, people understood that if they were like pushing a trip or like not doing that trip, maybe they could have not do it anymore. So COVID was the biggest wake-up call, because he told people, do it and do it now. Do it in this moment. Don't wait. And this is why the market is going so much faster after COVID.
So you describe it as almost a step change. That we had one kind of normal pre-COVID, and now we've got a totally new normal. And is that normal going to decline over time, do you think? Are you seeing any decline?
I think it doesn't, especially because with the AI and with the new less or remote working, you also have the possibility to work from wherever. And so you have more free time in where you can plan your holiday, but also your trip. So if before, for example, you had like 20 days per year in which you could organize your holiday, maybe now those 20 days became 40 days. And this is not only for me, but for everybody. And so you have more occasion in traveling. For example, before on Sunday night, many of the hotels were like empty because the business traveler weren't started yet, and the people who were there for the weekend, they were going back. But now, maybe I'm leaving Friday and coming back Tuesday, so there is a completely different way to travel.
Okay, I want to come back to you on specifically on the kind of the travel as travel perhaps distinguishable from the stay itself. Maybe we can come back to that. But Beto, I would like to come to you. In this new context, how does hospitality stay relevant?
Excellent question. I think the short and simple question is anchoring to authenticity. People will always be traveling to experience something different. And I would like to showcase what we are doing at Suda Peaks, a destination in South Saudi, at the highest peak in Saudi. Imagine, and I want the audience to imagine with me, opening a window at a hotel in your balcony, looking down at the mountains, at the clouds, not up, moving around green mountains, drinking coffee from local farms, and made by someone who grew up in the mountains.
Sorry, I think it was hard for people to hear. Go ahead, sorry.
So I was saying, imagine that you are in an ultra-luxury hotel, opening your window, looking down, not up at the clouds, moving around green mountains, drinking coffee from a local farms, made by someone who grew up in the region, listening to our stories about the culture and heritage. This is very powerful. And people will always want to experience something that, like this. Regardless of economic cycles, places like this will always be relevant to people. And the industry generally was built on one idea that if you have more hotels, more brands, more flights, the demand will follow. But we have seen in the past few years that this idea are not always true. People start thinking about why we travel, where to travel. So in conclusion, authenticity will always attract people. Places that rooted in that, shaped by its own land, its own culture, its own local community, will always stay relevant to people.
So you're talking about experience, you're talking about authenticity.
Yeah.
Manfredi, if I may, I want to come to you. How, in a world of authenticity, how do you diversify? What does diversification mean? Does it mean diversification of the audience? Does it mean diversification of the experience? Translate this idea of diversification for me in a world where we're maintaining authenticity and the experience.
Well, you know, both of my fellow panelists, they're very young. So, unfortunately, I'm not so young. So I come from a world which saw travel becoming from just a privilege for few to becoming an expectation for most. This is your point. People got used to the right to travel, and then suddenly they couldn't travel anymore. And to her point, now that they can travel again, they want to say, hey, I don't want to go to the usual beach. I want to do something which leaves me something after I've been there. And so that's a big thing, because the world is limited. There are not many other places around where to go. And population is expanding, places are being urbanized. So how to give a special experience to the people who want to experience something different is always more challenging. So with cruising, we have a lot of opportunities, because we can have people traveling in many remote destinations. They can go to the islands of Polynesia. They can go to the Arctic, the Antarctic. They can do the coast of Vietnam. They can do many things. So there's a lot of possibility to offer this diversity, let's call it. And that has to be achieved also in other ways. So it's a great challenge with a great opportunity. New areas where to send the people. About you, Paolo, with the working from home or from travel, this is a privilege for very few. This is a privilege only for the white collars in the Western countries. If you're somebody working in most of the world, you don't have that privilege. So that's another thing which I see it's mostly concentrated for us. But when we talk about traveling, it's not only for us, Western world or Saudi Arabia, which is a very affluent country. We're talking for traveling, which is going to become something expected for everybody around the world.
So when you talk about diversification, part of what your story is, it's not about just staying with the high-end luxury travelers, but it's actually getting down to middle economies.
But it all depends what you perceive to be high-end luxury. So everybody has his experiences in life. My high-end traveling is go to experiences that other people cannot access easily.
Yeah.
And as long as I have a minimum comfort, some quality of food, some place where I can sleep well and wash myself, that's an upgrading already. But the quality is, for me, what I experience. So if I was going on a beach, it's much better to be in a much lower level premises, but a much more remote beach, for example. Or I went to Morocco. What I loved going to Morocco was going to the south of Morocco, where you have oases which have been abandoned, and now they're making small boutique hotels, the basic services.
And so is that what, and maybe I'll come back to you, Paolo, how do you scale in this context, right? Because you're talking about authenticity, you're talking about the experience, but to your point, Manfredi, if you've got 1,000 people in that small village, that's no longer quite the same experience. How do you scale in this context?
The world is very big, so of course you need to create those infrastructure in places that where not everybody needs to go at the same time in the same places. Look at Italy, for example. In Italy, we have a concentration in major cities: Rome, Florence, Venice, Milan. Everybody wants to go to those cities. But we have an incredible country. From north to south, there are so many villages, so many places, so many little boutique hotel opportunities. So we need to teach people to also try to not always go in the same moment in the same destination. World is very big. I mean, you have the seasonality also is very important. So I think there is a possibility for scaling. Then, I mean, also for a company, also you need to understand what scaling means. I mean, for example, today the big brands, they want to have hotels everywhere. They go on a branding everywhere, but then sometimes they cannot give the same level of quality. So yes, they are scaling, but they're scaling for the worse, not for the better. Maybe you can create a different way to approach, and maybe there is a certain kind of scale that then goes into different section and division. I mean, you don't need to maybe scale all with the same brand, and this is the reason why there are now today different kind of groups with different kind of offer. I mean, Monsieur Lefebvre is the example. I mean, with his heritage group, he has access with the same philosophy, with the same DNA, to different kind of product, from cruising to safaris to different kind of. And we are trying to do the same with the hotels, with the trains, with the food and beverage.
So once you get, what is it that you're carrying, I guess? Is it the brand? You're able to take the feeling that people get when they come to an event that is Arsenal Spa? You know, is it the feeling that you're scaling, even in the different context? For both of you, because you both serve.
Yeah, so I not necessarily want to scale.
You don't want to scale?
This is not necessarily.
Oh,
if you
okay.
want to give an elite product, you don't want to scale it.
Yeah.
You want to have fewer people willing to pay more for a more unique experience. That you don't want to scale that.
And so how do you then translate that to diversification? And then I want to come back to you.
It depends for how many people you diversify. So some people, if you believe in a society where people can achieve different quality life based on their success, life, which I do, then you believe that with their success, they can buy special things.
Okay.
You can buy special clothes, special food, special hotel room, special destinations. Special destinations are destinations which are more remote and where people do not go. That's my job.
Mm-hmm.
With Abercrombie & Kent, that's what we try to do. So,
let me come back to you, Bador. Suda development is still in an early stage, right? Which gives you opportunity, right? How do you see your market a decade from now? What are you planning for a decade from now, excuse me? Or is that too long of a time horizon?
It's not too long, but there are like a lot of things, the project going into multiple phases. There are a number of offerings that will go in different phases, talking about diversity, talking about technology, talking about a lot of things that will integrate together to give integrated services and offerings for our guests. When you go there, you will experience different culinary, different culture, different heritage, different type of things that you will experience. So this is like the offerings that will go from now until different phases in the project.
So do all of you, if you could put your finger on something that is going to transform your industry over the next decade, I mean, you talked about technology. A lot of the conversations thus far have been about technology. If you were to put your finger on something that is going to transform your industry over the next decade, what would it be?
As a technology?
You tell me.
Well, I think that, for example, in our specific segment, like luxury, we cannot use too much technology to interact with the clients because clients want that touch and feel on the human. But we can use technology, AI, robotic, for example, for all what is the back of the house. So whatever the client doesn't see, and this can help process to be faster, to be better, and to have more people that can assist the client and can be front end. So we can be able, maybe with technology, to transfer part of the back-end people to the front end, ensuring and increasing the level of service that we can provide.
Manfredi?
Oh, I mean, again, you have to look at every specific case. That may be the case for Europe, but when you're talking about countries where the problem is the opposite, find employment for people, well, you don't want to cut jobs with robots. So that is a negative result of innovation. Because you have a lot of people, we say travel industry is one of the biggest employers. So it's underestimated. You see in this conference, how much do we talk about travel and leisure? Very little. It's this panel, maybe another couple. It's a massive industry with a massive impact on something which is one of the biggest problems, which is employment. Clearly, there is innovation which can reduce employment. Is that the main goal? I don't know. There are other ways that you can achieve, I would say, transportation. Allow people to move around the world in a better way. It could be a good achievement. Today you have helicopters. They're noisy. Tomorrow you will have mega drones. They don't make noise. They don't disturb the environment. That's another kind of innovation which will not create unemployment.
So it's interesting for all of the conversation about technology over the last 2 days, you're almost saying that we need to take that away from these experiences in order for people to really be present. Is that what I'm hearing?
Look, so back to your first question, the overarching theme is authenticity. Now let's deep dive into that. You have technology. Yes, at Suda Development, we embrace technology and innovation. We are all about AI to understand the travelers' preferences, digital twins to protect the forest in Suda, smart systems for waste management, all of that. But all of that are not the main act. It's what's quite enabler behind the curtains to equip and enable the talents who are there to serve the guests. There will not be anything that will replace a person from Suda or Rijal Alma welcoming a guest with the famous generosity. This is irreplaceable. but the technology component is very important to enable all of that. I want to
go on.
I want to add another point to contribute to the future of the industry, and this is my favorite topic, is about human capital and talents. And this is something we are investing a lot in Suda. We launched multiple programs, scholarships, SMEs program, to enable, exclusively to enable the local community from Sudan Rijal Al Ma. As we speak now, we have people studying in Lausanne, in Milan, different top hospitality schools who will come back, serve in the destination and to be the future face of the destination. So I think we can't like exclude one element, it's all integrated together. But as I told you, there are like overall arching themes.
So it's really, what I'm hearing from you is it's the people, it's the experience that makes the industry so robust, as it were. I want to come in the last few minutes we've got, but I also want to cue a question for the audience, if you can use your... the question is, will traditional or new locations become the hospitality hub of the future? Will traditional or new locations become the hospitality hub of the future? And if you'll vote, we'll come back to it at the end. But before we end, the global economy is going through far greater volatility than we've seen recently and is slowing according to a whole load of statistics. Is this something that worries you? Is this somehow different, or do you believe that the kind of robustness of the industry will be maintained even in a slowing economy?
Every time there is a slowdown in economy, of course, you always need to be somehow worried, because slowing down means less money, and so less money to spend also in services. However, I believe that in this moment, especially for our segment, there is a very strong traction. I believe that people will give different kind of priority in how they're doing their spending, and so I think that today the investment on the person, so this means that traveling, well-being, wellness, good food is probably a priority compared to other kind of investment, and so I'm very positive and bullish for our segment in the next years.
Wonderful. Manfredi?
No, I think our experience has told us that crises in the travel space are brief, many times violent, but short. So what you really need is staying power, not to go under when there is a crisis, but after that it will recover stronger. So it's a fact. We know it always happens. So today, the problem is Suez. You cannot pass through Suez. This limits cruise ships to come to the Red Sea or things like this. Tomorrow, this will be superseded, hopefully soon, and that will, again, that kind of a limitation will pass over. It's a strong trend. It doesn't go like this, it goes...
Yeah, it's oscillatory.
So yeah, you need to be able to pass through. I mean, if I see my Royal Caribbean shares, they were up down to $26 with COVID. There are over 300.
Yeah.
So
it's
2 years
difficult,
have
though.
passed.
I second my colleagues. I think there will be always different cycles in the economy. There will be always disruption in the industry. I think what holds the destination is, as I said from the beginning, being authentic, clear offerings, destinations that shaped by its own land, its own culture, local community will always be attractive to people.
So what would you answer? What answer would you give to this question? Will traditional new locations become the hospitality hub of the future? I can guess.
I haven't read this.
You see it?
Yeah.
Will traditional or new locations become the hospitality hub of the future?
I would say new. I would
okay.
say some new. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Manfredi?
New.
New?
Same.
New. Interesting. Okay, well, then we're constantly changing and we're constantly progressing. Thank you all very, very much. Long may the hospitality industry live strong. Will you all join me in thanking, please, the panel? Thank you so much.